Okay, I'm going to get started by welcoming you guys. Welcome to Watang Yu. Welcome to everyone joining online as well. This is the second day of a 5-day course that I'm teaching. And what we're going to do is start off with meditation like we typically do, where I'll do some chanting. I'll guide you in meditation. Then there'll be a period of time of quietness where we're all meditating together. Then we'll come out of that with some more chanting. But then I'm going to share with you guys the Eightfold Path. This is the core central teaching of the Buddha. If you're interested in getting to this enlightened mental state where the mind's completely peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy, it's this teaching that you would need to know inside and out, backwards and forwards, left, right, up, down. So I'm going to take my time and walk you guys through this using the original words of the Buddha. That's going to take us through the entire morning. We'll have a mid-morning break, of course. And then after lunch, we'll come back and I'm going to teach the ins and outs of meditation. I'm going to teach you all the details about breathing mindfulness meditation. So if you guys would like to join for the meditation, you're welcome to take whatever position is comfortable for you. You're welcome to join in the chanting, and then I'll come back in with the guidance afterwards. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Emakewa Bhutang Mahakewanang Apivateyami Savakato Emakewata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Emakewato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso emakewa Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang sammuno Sakato rokavitu Anutero purisa Dhamma sati satatawa manusanang Bhutto Bhagavati. Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, and the upper body erect, just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here, you're just looking to establish the breath, a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath, not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathing gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. Arahang Sama Sambuddho Mahakeva Bhutang Mahakavanang Abhivateyami Savakato Mahakavata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakavato Savakasangho Sanghang Namami Namo Arhasa Bhagavato Arahato Sama Sambuddhassa Namo Arhasa Bhagavato Arahato Sama Sambuddhassa Namo Arhasa Bhagavato Arahato Sama Sambuddhassa Iti piso Mahakava Arahang Sama Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakato Rokavitu Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusnang Bhutto Bhagavati. Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Once again, good morning to all of you guys. Nice to see everyone. Welcome to everyone online who's joining as well. Yesterday, as part of our topics, I taught what is enlightenment, so people could understand what this mental state is. And we talked about these 4 stages of enlightenment. We talked about the qualities of the enlightened mind, where the mind's completely peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. By the time you get to enlightenment, you don't experience any discontent feelings. You had eliminated all the causes and conditions that are producing anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy. We talked about the 10 fetters and uprooting these pollutions out of the mind, and how, as doing so, you'll experience focus, concentration, clarity, and deep memory. And you'll notice all your personal and professional relationships really blossoming. Because in the unenlightened state, you'll have a certain amount of bitterness and harshness and hostility in your mind, and that's going to come out in some of your relationships, and now it's going to damage your relationships. And you'll notice all that stuff is coming back to you in those relationships. Well, there's a solution for this. There's an escape for this. There's a way for you to be able to get to the point where you're experiencing nothing but a fulfilling and satisfying life. And it's the Eightfold Path. It is the core central teaching that's going to help you to be able to understand how to move your mind to this point where the mind's enlightened, where you won't even be able to experience a bad mood anymore. It's physically impossible for an enlightened being to experience a bad mood. So it's this teaching that you need to learn inside and out, backwards and forwards, left, right, up, down. This is a teaching that you're going to need to revisit multiple times, because you're not going to be able to learn it just once and then just immediately implement it in your life. You're going to need to kind of tweak it and dial it in closer and closer. In fact, that's the way that I think about this teaching. The way that I think about it is like 8 individual dials, that if you had a speaker system and you were trying to get a better and better quality sound out of the speakers, you would actually tweak these 8 individual dials to get a better sound out of the speakers. Well, your mind is the same way, that if you dial these 8 things in closer and closer in your life, you'll see that your mind's performing better and better. You'll notice that you're experiencing that focus, the concentration, clarity, and deep memory. The mind will slowly but gradually move to this enlightened mental state. So there's these 8 individual factors that I'm going to be sharing with you guys using the original words of the Buddha to help you guys understand what he taught on this topic. Now, that sounds pretty obvious. People sometimes might think, well, if you're going to teach the Buddha's teachings, wouldn't you use the original words of the Buddha? There's over 500 million people who consider themselves to be Buddhist in the world, and very few of them actually study with the original words of the Buddha. I've been to over 200 temples in my life, and I've only ever been to one that actually shares the original teachings of the Buddha. So if you do the math, that's less than 1%. So it's really important that whenever you're interested in studying the teachings of the Buddha, that you get back to his true teachings, his original words, using reliable translations. And that's what I'm going to share with you today, so you can see what did the Buddha teach on this important topic of the Eightfold Path, because this is the path to enlightenment. In terms of getting to enlightenment, this is the path. But when you're learning his teachings, you don't believe his teachings. They're not a bunch of beliefs that you believe. It's not a bunch of rules or commandments. Instead, what I'm going to be doing is sharing information with you guys that helps you to understand the world around you and helps you to understand how your mind functions. But then you don't believe that. You learn it, investigate, examine it intellectually. Then you reflect on it to verify if it's true or false through your own direct experiences in your day-to-day life. And then you practice the teachings, integrating these into your day-to-day life, and that's where you'll see the real results. When the Buddha was teaching his students, he encouraged them to listen with eager ears. That's the way that you're going to be able to learn and actually get the benefit of his teachings. If an individual just sat back and kind of let the teachings kind of roll over their head, they're not going to actually be able to experience the benefit that the Buddha is teaching you to be able to get to this enlightened mental state. So you're going to need to be actively involved with your own learning to listen with eager ears like the Buddha shared. So I'm going to walk you guys through this and show you how you can learn something, how you can reflect on it to verify it, and how you can practice it using this Eightfold Path here as a guide. We're going to be starting with right view, which establishes a foundation for you. Then we're going to move into right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. This is organized into 3 sections. The wisdom section, which forms a foundation of understanding for you. Then the moral conduct, which is going to help you to see how to improve the way that you interact with others through your day-to-day interactions, through speech, actions, and your livelihood, ensuring that you're not causing harm to others. And then the mental discipline section, where it's helping to hone your mind so that you can actually implement the moral conduct. So I'm going to walk you through this, and we'll take a mid-morning break as well to give you guys a chance to, spend some time with each other, use the bathroom, get us some snacks and all that kind of stuff. But feel free to move about the classroom as you like. I'll be pausing a few times as we go, several times actually, to open up for questions. If you guys have questions here, you guys know we have the microphones. You guys are welcome to use that. The people online will appreciate that. And then for the people that are online, if you guys would like to ask questions, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom in the comment section, and I'll see that. Or you can raise your hand electronically in Zoom and unmute your microphone and ask any questions that you like that way. So this is the first step of the Eightfold Path, the first factor. And these are the words of the Buddha, what he taught on this important topic. He says, "In what, monks, is right view? It is, monks, the wisdom of discontentedness, the wisdom of the cause of discontentedness, the wisdom of the elimination of discontentedness, and the wisdom of the way of practice leading to the elimination of discontentedness. This is called right view." So in this particular teaching, the Buddha is actually pointing to another teaching and saying that is right view over there. Because what the Eightfold Path is a core central teaching that everything else integrates into. So what he's pointing to here in right view is a teaching called the Four Noble Truths. This is the very first teaching of the Buddha, where in 4 simple statements, he explains to you the problem in the mind, the cause of the problem, the elimination of that problem, and the complete solution of how to eliminate it. So here he's just saying something very general and very broad in order to point to the Four Noble Truths. Underneath of this line right here, I have the top section of the Four Noble Truths so that you can actually build confidence that what he's talking about in the Eightfold Path is the Four Noble Truths. You can see that connection and correlation. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to teach you the Four Noble Truths in their entirety. But in order to teach you the Four Noble Truths, I need to first teach you the 3 universal truths. These are actually building blocks to help you understand the to understand the Four Noble Truths. We call them the 3 universal truths and the Four Noble Truths because I know that they're true. The Buddha knew that they were true. Other people know that they're true, but you're going to need to know they're true. And that's why you don't believe what it is that I'm sharing here. You need to learn, reflect, and practice. And I'll show you guys how to do that. So this first universal truth, the Buddha is explaining to you the way the world is. That's what the Buddha does through all of his teachings. He doesn't explain to you the way the world should be, and if everybody follows rules and commandments, the world's going to become a better place. He's explaining to you the way the world is, because when you're experiencing anger and sadness and frustration and all these other feelings, the stress and anxiety, the mind's living in a world that it doesn't understand, and now it's struggling and having difficulties. But by understanding the way the world is and awakening to that wisdom, now you can navigate the world peacefully. So one of the building blocks to be able to understand the Four Noble Truths, which will help you understand the problem in the mind, the cause of that, the elimination of it, and the path forward, is this first universal truth. The universal truth of impermanence is explaining to you that everything in the world around you is constantly changing. That anything that you can see, hear, smell, taste, anything that comes in contact with the body or any thoughts or ideas that go through the mind, it's all impermanent. It's constantly changing. These are called conditioned objects. Conditioned objects arise, they change, and then they fade away. So you need to be able to understand this intellectually. There's also something called unconditioned objects in the world. Unconditioned objects do not arise, they do not change, and they do not fade away. They are actually permanent. So the things that are permanent are enlightenment. Once you attain that mental state, it's a permanent mental state. And the natural laws that the Buddha taught 2,500 years ago, those actually are permanent. They don't change. That's why his teachings are timeless. What he taught 2,500 years ago is just as applicable today as it was 2,500 years ago, because he's describing these natural laws to you, and they don't change. They are unconditioned. So there's something called conditioned objects that arise, change, and fade away, and that's anything in the world, in this material world, that you can see, hear, smell, taste, anything that comes in contact with the body, or any thoughts or ideas that go through the mind. Those are conditioned objects, pretty much everything around you. And then there's these unconditioned objects, which are very few, just the natural laws, and enlightenment, which don't arise, they don't change, and they don't fade away. Okay, so this is a little bit of the intellectual understanding of the universal truth of impermanence, helping you see that things are constantly changing. But you don't believe that, right? That's just me sharing with you the information. You need to independently verify it, because with belief, you don't know it's true or false. You're just believing it because someone convinced you to believe it, or you convinced yourself to believe it. So now we move this into reflection, and we start looking around the world to try to determine if what I just said is true or false. And this is what I suggest you do, is you start with something that you're familiar with and ask yourself, is it permanent or impermanent? Something like this human body. Ask yourself, because you're very familiar with this body, is this body permanent, meaning it's always the same and it never changes, or is this body impermanent, meaning it's constantly changing? So what would you say? Is it permanent or impermanent? It's impermanent, right? Ever since the egg and sperm came together, this body's been constantly changing. We got taller, we get shorter sometimes, we get bigger, we get smaller, right? When we were first born, we didn't have teeth and our teeth grew in. That's change, right? And then those teeth fell out. That's change. And then more teeth grew in. That's change. And now those teeth get cavities. That's change, right? We get wrinkles, we get pimples, we get moles, we get gray hair, we start losing our hair, all these kinds of things. things, right? All this is change that we experience as part of this body being impermanent. What about your relationships? Are your relationships permanent, meaning you've had exactly the same people in your life your entire life? Or are your relationships impermanent, meaning you've had people coming and going in and out of your life? They're impermanent, right? People are coming and going. What about your bank account? Is your bank account permanent or impermanent? It's impermanent. You maybe like it to be permanent, right? But it's impermanent, right? It's going up and down and up and down. Some people's goes up, 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 which that's change as well. Some people's goes down, 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 down. That's change as well, right? What about the weather? Is the weather permanent or impermanent? It's impermanent, right? It's sunny, it's snowing in some places, sleeting, you get hurricanes, typhoons. This is all change, right? So we could go on and on and on like this. And if that's what you need to do it, because you need to look around the world to verify that this is true, because this is a key important building block to help you understand the Four Noble Truths when we get to this. So when you're walking down the street and you see a crack in the sidewalk, that is impermanence. When you look at a tree and you see green leaves in the tree and the brown leaves on the ground, that's impermanence. That's change, right? Yesterday we had certain people in this class. Today we have different people in this class, right? This is change. When you look at the floor of the temple, you look at the wood planks. Some of them are longer, some of them are shorter, some of them are one color, some of them are a different color. There's different colored planks of wood on the wood floor, right? This is constant change. When we started out, people were sitting in one place and now they're sitting in a different place, right? This is constant change. There's always change around you, right? So you need to be able to see this truth for yourself, okay? And that's going to come into play when we get into the Four Noble Truths. You'll see why that's important, okay? Then there's the second universal truth. This is called discontentedness. If you study teachings of the Buddha in other places, you might have heard the word suffering being used here. I'm going to explain to you what the Buddha taught on this important topic, and then I'm going to circle back and help you understand why I don't use the word suffering, because it doesn't accurately reflect what the Buddha was teaching. So let me explain to you what the Buddha was teaching first. So this particular universal truth is explaining to you what the unenlightened mind experiences. The Buddha explains how you experience conditioned feelings. There's three feelings that the unenlightened mind experiences: pleasant feelings, painful feelings, and feelings that are neither painful nor pleasant. And the mind is discontent when it's experiencing this, meaning it's all shaken up. So pleasant feelings are things like happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration, or euphoria. The painful feelings are things like sadness, anger, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety. Very painful to experience that. Then there's neither painful nor pleasant. I put boredom and loneliness here, but some people say that's very painful for them. So you could put it in the painful category if you like, but shyness is a good example. It's not painful, it's not pleasant, it's neither painful nor pleasant. Or say you were on public transportation and somebody you didn't know came and sat really, really close to you and your body was touching their body. You might say, it's not painful, it's not pleasant. Maybe you're kind of uncomfortable or dissatisfied in that situation, right? That's neither painful nor pleasant. So these are the three feelings that the unenlightened mind will experience. And they're called conditioned feelings because they're experienced based on some condition. So for example, if you wake up in the morning and you see it's sunny outside and you get happy, that's conditional happiness. Based on the condition that there's sun, the mind will now experience happiness. But the problem with that conditional happiness is it's temporary because it arises, it changes, and it fades away. It's conditional. Because now when it rains, that person will be frustrated or angry or irritated because they can only be happy when it's sunny outside. Their happiness is based on the sun, but the sun is not permanent. This is why people haven't been able to get to permanent happiness, because their mind is basing their inner feelings on this external subject or this external object. So, for example, an unenlightened being, when they see it's sunny outside, they might get so happy or excited. It's like, yay, I'm going to go hiking today. This is going to be so fun. I've been wanting to go on this trail for a long time. And then they'll go take a shower. And when they come out, they'll see it's raining. And it's like, oh, I can't go hiking. They'll be so upset. And now they'll be miserable and frustrated. Where an enlightened being, they actually wake up in the morning. They're already happy before they see the sun. They're already inwardly happy. There doesn't need to be any condition met in order for there to be happiness in the mind. The mind is experiencing unconditional happiness, where in the unenlightened state, you're experiencing conditional happiness, right? So this enlightened being wakes up, they're already happy. It's like, sweet, it's sunny outside. I'm going to go hiking today. This is going to be wonderful. And now you go take a shower. When you come out and it's raining, and it's like, oh, it's raining. Well, I guess I'm not going to go outside. Well, maybe I'll stay home and read a book, or I'll go to the mall, or maybe I'll invite my friends over and cook some food for them. This will be really fun. You can maintain your happiness because your happiness isn't based on the sun. So when the sun's gone, you can still maintain your happiness. So the enlightened mind is beyond the conditioned feelings of pleasant, painful, and neither painful nor pleasant. It's not being shaken up or unsteady or uncalm. So this is what the unenlightened mind experiences, is conditional feelings. It's kind of like, if this condition is met, and 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 this condition is met, then I'll be happy, right? But then when those things aren't met, then the mind will be sad or angry or frustrated, right? So it's kind of limiting an individual's ability to be happy because you've got all these conditions that have to be true before you can be happy. So this is what the Buddha is describing as the unenlightened mind. So you know that your mind is unenlightened. So ask yourself, is this what you experience? Is there any feeling in here? Because this is the reflection part. This is the independent verification part. Is there any feeling that you experience that doesn't fit into one of these three categories? And if so, we'll talk about it when we get to the question period. Okay. Now, some people refer to this as suffering. I don't refer to it that way because suffering describes the painful feelings really well. When you're sad or angry or frustrated, you might say that you're suffering. But if your boss walked into your office and said, man, you are doing such an outstanding job, I'm going to give you $100,000 a year more raise for your paycheck, and you got really happy and excited about that, would you say you were suffering? Probably not, right? Or that person you don't know comes and sits really close to you on public transportation and your body's touching their body. Would you say you were suffering in that situation? Probably not, right? So if you use the word suffering, it's only explaining 33% of what the Buddha was teaching. You're missing 66% of his teachings. And how could you ever get to the goal of what this teacher is guiding you towards if you're missing 66% of his teachings? So I use the word discontent, discontented, and discontentedness because it explains how the mind's shaken up. It's unsteady, it's uncalm. It's happy, it's excited, it's elated, but then it's angry and sad and frustrated. But then it's bored and lonely and, feeling shyness and embarrassed and disappointed. There's some calm and peacefulness here and there, but it's only a matter of time before you get annoyed or frustrated or agitated about something. So what you need to be able to do is see these conditioned pleasant feelings as just as much a part of the problem as the painful ones. Because if you allow your mind to get conditioned pleasant feelings, the painful ones are waiting for you right around the corner. Because if you get so happy and excited with that brand new job that you just got, and it's like, oh my gosh, this is the best company, the best title, the best salary, the best coworkers. Oh my gosh, the office is beautiful. I'm going to really enjoy this job so much. And you get so excited about it. Well, 3 years later, when they lay you off or they go out of business or they fire you, you'll be angry. You'll be frustrated because your happiness is based on this condition. And that condition is not permanent. So you need to be able to let go of the temporary happiness, the temporary conditional feelings of happiness in order to be able to get to the permanent happiness where the mind is experiencing unconditional happiness. So you need to be able to see these pleasant feelings as just as much a part of the problem as the painful ones, the conditional pleasant feelings, that you can only be happy if certain conditions are met. And this is why the word discontent, discontented, and discontentedness is a much better word to use here, because it's pretty intuitive to think that you need to eliminate sadness, anger, frustration, and all of this. But the idea of eliminating happiness and excitement, people are like, what are you talking about, David? That's what I live for, right? I live for that stuff. But see, that's just temporary. We can only experience it under certain conditions. What the Buddha is teaching you to do is get to the point where your mind's always happy. You're experiencing unconditional joy and unconditional happiness, and you can't get to that if you keep allowing your mind to experience conditional happiness. Okay, so this is discontent, discontented, or discontentedness. the second universal truth, explaining what the unenlightened mind experiences. Then there's the third universal truth of non-self. I'll explain this to you, but let me first explain to you the problem that this is solving, because this is actually a solution to one of the problems that the Buddha discovered. Out of those 10 fetters that we talked about yesterday, by the way, what a fetter is it's a pollution of the mind. The Buddha discovers these 10 individual pollutions that are in the mind. And what you're doing on the path to enlightenment is you're uprooting those and eliminating those out of the mind. You're purifying the mind, eliminating these 10 fetters, these pollutions. What a fetter is a shackle and a chain and a ball that during the lifetime of the Buddha, that's how they would keep you confined to a certain area, like a prisoner. They would keep you out in the middle of a field, where today we put prisoners in jail cells. But during his lifetime, they would put a shackle and a chain and a ball around your ankle. So when he discovers these 10 pollutions in the mind, he calls them fetters because it's keeping the mind trapped in the unenlightened state, continuing to experience anger and sadness and frustration over and over and over again. But just like a prisoner, when you release the shackle off the ankle, they're now free to roam about the world. They're liberated. The same thing is true about your mind. When you eliminate these fetters out of the mind is now free. Because when you're angry and feeling stress and anxiety, you're not free. The mind's all bound up, right? So the very first pollution, or the very first fetter that's keeping the mind in the unenlightened state, is called personal existence view. What this is where the mind is clinging to this body and or this mind, thinking that this is who you are as a person and wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way. So, for example, you might cling to your self-image or your self-identity, wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way. And you can only be happy if you're being perceived the way you want to be perceived. So, for example, if you've ever spilt something on your clothing in a social situation and you were embarrassed by that, that's your personal existence view. Thinking that this body is who you are, you cling to it, want it to be permanent, and now you can only be happy if you're being perceived the way you want to be perceived. Clean clothes, I feel great, I feel wonderful. Dirty clothes, maybe you think you look like a slob, and now you think other people are going to perceive you that way, and now you're uncomfortable in that situation. Your mind's maybe embarrassed or frustrated or agitated or annoyed. Or this personal existence view, this fetter of personal existence view, this pollution of mind, maybe you looked in the mirror and you saw a pimple or a wrinkle or a mole or a gray hair, or you started losing your hair. You started, you were all shaken up by that when you saw that in the mirror. That's your personal existence view, thinking that this body is who you are and you only feel comfortable being perceived a certain way by others. Maybe you stood in front of your closet and you put on some clothes thinking, who am I going to see today and how do I want to look? And you put on a certain set of clothes, looked in the mirror and you're like, no, that's not it. And you put on a second set of clothes and you're like, no, that's not it. You put on a third set and you're like, all right, now I feel comfortable to go outside. This is your personal existence view. Or maybe you were like me when I was a kid. Before I would go to school, I would get out gel and mousse and I would run it through my hair and I'd try to get every little hair in exactly the right spot. And I couldn't go outside until I had every little hair in the right spot. And I did this so long, sometimes I would miss the school bus, right? This is the personal existence view, clinging to this physical body, wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way and only feeling comfortable if you're being perceived that way. But then there's a certain self-identity that the mind will cling to based on your culture, your ethnicity, your sexual orientation, your nationality, your job or occupation, that you might think that this is who you are as a person. And now you can only feel comfortable when those things are intact and you're being perceived the way you want to be perceived. So, for example, any of this I am, like I am American, I am a Brit, I am Canadian, I am Korean, I am Spanish, I am South African, any of this I am. And now let's just say you're at a restaurant and 2 tables over, somebody's talking very fondly of the nationality that you have in your mind. And they might say, all Americans are so lovely and kind and warm and gentle. I've never heard people say this before, but maybe they might say it someday, right? And they might be saying this and you think like, wow, I'm an American. And now you're so happy that they're talking about you in a positive way because your mind's holding on to this identity of who you think you are as a person. But then because of impermanence, it's only a matter of time before 2 tables over, somebody says something degrading or disparaging about this nationality. identity that you're holding on to in your mind. And now you're frustrated and angry, thinking that they're talking about you. So the mind will cling to a certain identity. Maybe you've been in a relationship with a boyfriend or girlfriend or husband or wife, and you think, I am a husband, I am a wife, I am a boyfriend, I am a girlfriend. And when you guys were together, you might have had a certain amount of comfort in that situation. But then when you guys broke up, your mind didn't identify with I am single. And now you might have felt uncomfortable. And you might have felt like the way to solve that is to hurry up and get right back into another relationship so you can reassume that identity of who you think you are. Or maybe you had a certain job or occupation that you identified with this is who you are as a person. Like maybe I am a police officer. And now, as long as I'm doing that job, I feel really great. But 10, 15, 20 years later, I get injured. Maybe I get fired or laid off, or I retire. And now maybe I'm driving a taxi and I'm frustrated and I'm irritated and grumpy and irritable because my mind identifies with I am a police officer. But now I feel less whole because I don't feel like a full person because my mind is identifying with I'm a police officer, but I'm not doing that job anymore, right? So your mind can cling to any number of things of who you think you are as a person, even choices and decisions that you've made. Some people might teach you, if you've used drugs and alcohol in the past, that you might identify with I am an alcoholic or I am an addict. This isn't true. This person might have chosen to make decisions where they were using drugs and alcohol in the past, but that doesn't make them this I am an alcoholic or I am an addict. And I understand why people teach this because they're trying to make sure that you understand to never go back and use drugs and alcohol again. But once you adopt that identity in your mind of I am an alcoholic or I am an addict, this is where guilt and shame can come into the mind, thinking that there's something wrong with me or that I'm deficient in some way. Where what we can do is we can get to a point where you realize non-self. You can realize that this isn't you. This isn't who you are. Just because I made these choices and decisions in the past doesn't define who I am today as a person. So what the Buddha teaches you is that this self-image, this body, is not you. It's not who you are as a person, and not to identify with it as who you are, wanting and longing, yearning for others to perceive you a certain way. And the same thing with the mind is to eliminate any type of identity that the mind is clinging to, thinking that this is who you are as a person, wanting others to perceive you in a certain way, because you'll never get to peace and joy if you continue to allow your mind to cling to this. So you need to do what's called realizing non-self, where you strip this away, you train your mind to no longer cling to any of these things. But the problem is that the mind has been clinging to this and developing this all throughout your life, ever since birth. When you were first born, every single one of us were given a label, right? My label's David. I don't know all of your labels, but you probably have one too, right? And now this label that we've been given, we have a certain personality and a certain character that we assign to that. And we develop this over time. In even our countries, we have certain flags and national anthems and sports teams, and we cheer and cheer and cheer, thinking I am this, so I need to cheer for that team. So it gets really ingrained in our mind to think that this is who we are as a person. In fact, some people have personal existence view so badly that they will go to their family and they will say, Mom and Dad, I don't know who I am anymore. I need to go find myself. I need to go find my true self. And they might take off to Thailand or other places in the world to go find themselves. And now they come here and they might travel around for a while, or Mexico or other places, and travel around to find themselves. Well, they might be here for 6 months or a year, however long, and eventually they're like, yes, I found myself. I know who I am again. And they'll go home and they'll talk to their family. They'll be like, Mom and Dad, that was such a great trip. I found myself. I know who I am again. They didn't find themselves because it doesn't actually exist. They might have found new hobbies, new activities, a new job. They might have found new friends, but none of that stuff is them, because if you cling to any of that as who you think you are, as soon as it changes, you'll be right back in the same problem again. So some people, when I explain this, they understand it right from the beginning. Other times they don't. It's very challenging for the mind to understand this. There's some classes that I teach a whole hour and a half just on this topic right here to help people understand it. So if you're in the category of not understanding it fully, it's okay. You'll still be able to fully understand what it is I'm going to teach you today with all the other teachings. But just understand that it's sometimes challenging for people to understand that. I've seen some students take upwards of a year to be able to understand this. So no matter what category you're in, whether you're starting to understand it or you're not, I can help you to independently verify that there is no self. Okay, so here's the way that you can do this, because that was the intellectual learning that I just shared with you. Now we can move it into reflection. Okay, so think about yourself when you were a child, when you were a teenager, early adulthood, and then now. Okay, think about your personality and your character. Have you thought about yourself in exactly the same way in all those 4 phases of your life, or has it been constantly changing? What would you say? It's been changing, right? So you can see there's no self, there's no you. Here's another way. If your arm is amputated and it was cut off at the shoulder and you only have one hand and one arm, are you less of a person? See you guys shaking your head no, right? You're not less of a person, right? So you can see intellectually, you understand that this body is not you. You understand that intellectually, but because of the pollution of personal existence view, when you're in the heat of the moment and someone says, wow, you're so handsome, you're so beautiful, that shirt really brings out the colors of your eyes. You're like, whoa, they're talking about me, right? But then it's only a matter of time before someone says, where did you get that haircut? Are you going outside looking like that? And now you're angry or frustrated, right? So intellectually, you can see that you understand that this body is not you. Otherwise, you would have answered that question differently. You would have said, yes, there's less body, so there's less me, so I'm less of a person. But hardly anybody ever answers it that way. Pretty much everybody always says, no, I'm not less of a person. I just have less use of a hand and an arm, right? That's pretty much all that it is. But that's the intellectual you. That's the intellectual mind that is able to see that. But this personal existence view, in the heat of the moment, it gets confused. And when someone says something agreeable or disagreeable, you'll either get happy and excited or you'll get angry and frustrated about when people are commenting about this body. Here's a third way you can independently verify that there is no self. Point to yourself. Where are you? Okay, she's pointing there. That's a common place. What about the rest of you guys? Where are you? Yep, some people point here too. That's like another common place. So if you're pointing here and you say, I am here, you've got to see what you're pointing to. Is you're pointing to a shirt. That's what you're pointing to. So if we took off our shirt and we held it up and pointed to it, is that you? Is that who you are as a person? That's not you, right? So we'll throw that away. Where are you? And then somebody might point again. And now you're pointing to skin. Ask yourself, is that who you are, that skin that you've got? If we were able to rip off your skin and hold it up and point to it, is that you? Is that who you are? That's not you, right? Okay, throw that away. Where are you? And then someone might point again. And now we've got bones, we've got muscle tissue, we've got organs, we've got fluid. None of these bits and pieces and parts are you. But the mind is clinging to all of this, thinking that somehow this is who you are. Okay, and the mind needs to get free of that in order to be able to get to peace and joy. So I'm going to pause here and see what questions you might have about the 3 universal truths, because these are building blocks to understand the Four Noble Truths, and then we'll move into the Four Noble Truths. Do you guys have any questions on this? I see Rachel Zoom has a question. So Rachel asks, so the right view, non-self, is the most difficult concept to grapple with in terms of right view. While practicing the Eightfold Path, will this help dissolve the concept of non-self? It is something I can understand, but I am still deeply rooted in my identity. I can see this is a large task. There's the Eightfold Path that needs to be practiced in order to be able to help you to realize non-self. You need to put that together first and practice that really well, because that kind of prepares the mind to be able to realize non-self. But then there's very specific things that you need to practice in order to be able to help you proactively train your mind to eliminate the personal existence view. So one of the things that the Buddha taught is like shaving your hair and wearing simple clothes, removing jewelry, not wearing makeup, things like this, removing facial hair. Whether someone chooses to do these things or not, it's a choice for each person to make, but you'll see that these will proactively help you to be able to eliminate personal existence view. I recently taught this as part of the group learning program, because in volume 1, chapter 16, this is titled Dissolving the Ego, Ego Serves No Purpose. I show you what personal existence view is and what conceit is. This comprises the ego, and then I give you detailed instructions of how to eliminate personal existence view and how to eliminate conceit. So there's things that you can be doing to proactively work on this. But if you don't yet have the Eightfold Path well underway and well developed, it doesn't make sense to necessarily go off and start to implement those things. I mean, you could, but you don't have to, right? It's really best if you really get the Eightfold Path well underway first. And there's other things you can do. Like, everybody doesn't have to shave their hair in order to get to enlightenment, right? Not everybody has to wear these white clothes in order to get to enlightenment, but you do need to eliminate personal existence views. So there's things like, instead of allowing your mind to pick which clothes you're going to wear in a given day, where you're standing there thinking, who am I going to see today and how do I want to look? You can actually stack your clothes up and just pick off the top, right? And don't give your mind a chance to pull from the middle based on going to see that certain person today. So there's things like this that you can learn. So I would go back, if I was you, look in volume 1, chapter 16, Rachel, if you'd like to learn more, and then also watch the associated classes where I've taught that, and that'll help you. And then let me know what questions you have, and I'll help you with it. Question?
Good morning. Right. These 3 noble universal truths, I find them that the more I reflect on them, at the beginning I thought, yes, I understand them. But the more I reflect on them, I guess the more I question them, and then I struggle to actually fully understand them. So for the non-self one, I think I can understand the elimination of personal existence view. However, I see my mind having a craving to fully understand it intellectually. So then reflecting on it, I can say, okay, I'm not my body. Am I my mind? Probably not, because I can observe the mind. So am I that awareness? Mm-hmm. So I guess my question for you is, am I the awareness? Did the Buddha ever talk about awareness?
He talked about awareness, but this isn't you. Okay. So when you say that, when you think about this and you think about your mind and you say, I'm probably not the mind, that's you leaning in the direction of eliminating personal existence view, but the mind still doesn't know 100% that this mind is not you. You're still kind of a little bit 1 foot in, 1 foot out kind of thing. So you need to get to the point where you can see clearly that there is a body, there is a mind, and they've come together for this existence. And we call that a human being, right? Or a person, but none of that defines who you are. That the mind needs to eliminate its clinging to this, identifying with any of it as who you are. Because what the mind will do is it'll typically say, well, if I'm not the body and I'm not the mind, then what am I? Right? That's the mind continuing to grasp and long and yearn for something. It's trying to grab onto something and say, this is what I am. And as soon as you grab onto that and you say, this is what I am, now your mind's susceptible to discontentedness. So even if you thought, I am a human being, even though intellectually we know that we refer to this as a human being, but if your mind adopts the identity of I am a human being. Well, when you hear somebody say all human beings are blah, 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 now you're angry. Now you're frustrated because your mind's clinging to this. So it's a matter of understanding that you perform certain roles, you were born in a certain place, you do certain things, but without allowing your mind to adopt an identity of who you are and clinging to that, and now forming feelings based on either agreeable or disagreeable contact that you have with that particular thing.
But that I say I can understand, but probably I'm going to ask you more questions about it, in a couple of weeks. But what is, the observer? So I can observe, I can observe my mind, no? Are we that awareness or that observer? What?
No.
And I'm trying to cling on what we are, but
this is the mind still grasping. Right? So what the Buddha is teaching you is not that there isn't a being here. We can see physically that there's a being here. He's teaching you not to allow your mind to cling to it and then have identity in this personal existence view, because that's where you're going to experience the discontentedness. But that's what the mind's going to keep trying to do. I am a student. I am an entrepreneur. I am a daughter. I am a wife. I am a this. I am a that. The mind's going to want to grab onto all this stuff. And you've got to understand that you can do those things without allowing your mind to identify. So like, for example, someone might say, I am a Buddhist teacher. No, I understand that, yes, I perform that role and I'm in this role of sharing the teachings of the Buddha, but the mind doesn't have that identity. So when someone says, all Buddhist teachers are lovely and kind, they're so generous with their time. Okay, I understand. And then someone else says, all Buddhist teachers are leading people to hell. How dare they? La, la, la. Okay, doesn't bother me, right? Because I don't have that in my mind where I am a Buddhist teacher, because they're not talking about me. So the Buddha's specific words on this is he says, there is no you there, right? There is no you there. But the mind's going to keep trying to find a you. And it's going to keep trying to grab onto something as who you are as a person. And you need to just train your mind to let all that go. Where you are in a relationship with a husband and a wife, you have that relationship. Sure, you have a mother and a father, and your people would describe you as a daughter, right? But you don't need to adopt that in your mind as this is who I am. Right? Because now, like, say, for example, if someone thought I am a husband or I'm a wife, well, when the relationship's over, for whatever reason, even death, now you feel like less of a person and you feel depleted and you feel like worthless, where that's what the Buddha is teaching you, to not identify with any of that stuff. But of course, you're in that role and you have that partner. Your mic's off. Yep. I think they turn off automatically if they're not being used.
So I understand that we can drop identities, that we just play identities or roles because we're in a society. But I guess what I'm trying to grasp is more, I can see that this is a craving. It's more like, okay, we have a body, we have a role that we play in society. I can drop that. I'm not necessarily Spanish, I'm not necessarily a wife, I'm not necessarily, I can drop that. But then when I try to go inwards and think, okay, I'm not my mind, because when I'm meditating, I can observe the mind and I can see how silly some thoughts are. So I don't identify with those thoughts.
Mm-hmm. The microphone's impermanent. I think it needs new batteries.
Then I kind of have an existential question of, I'm not all these identities, I'm not my body, I'm not my mind, because I can, so if I'm not my thoughts, what am I? Am I the observer of that mind? Am I the observer of the thoughts?
That's the mind still grasping. The mind's still trying to hold on to something. When you ask the question, well, what am I? That's the mind trying to find a I am. Where what the Buddha is teaching you is there is no I am. You've got to let that go. But the minds keep grasping at it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think.
Okay. Yeah, this is a teaching that takes time to understand and then to more fully implement. Yeah. Okay. So I don't see any questions anywhere else. Let me just check one more place here online. Okay, I don't see any questions here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you one more building block so that we can understand this, and then we can move off to the Four Noble Truths. So you need to understand what is a craving, desire, attachment, the wants and expectations, the grasping, the holding. This is the mind longing, yearning, chasing after the objects of its affection, thinking that the next new shiny object waiting around the corner is going to provide some lasting satisfaction. So the mind chases it and chases it and chases it and chases it. It's almost like an unquenchable thirst that the mind has. If you've ever been in the mall and you were like, oh, new pair of shoes. Oh, I just can't wait to get those on my feet. And you felt this pull towards this thing. Maybe it was a pair of shoes. Maybe it was jewelry. Maybe it was a new phone. Maybe it was a video game or some other thing. Do you guys know what I'm talking about here? Have you seen your mind do that? Yeah, where it pulls towards something. This is the craving, desire, attachment. Okay, it's not the object itself. It's the way that the mind pulls towards the object, right? So it's not the phone itself that is the attachment. It's the way the mind longs and yearns for it, thinking it's going to provide some lasting satisfaction. So it holds on to it and it craves it and it clings to it. Okay, so this is the last building block to now help you understand the Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truths, we're going to understand the problem in the mind, the cause of the problem, the elimination of it, and the path forward in four simple statements. So here, the problem, the first noble truth. Everyone that is unenlightened will experience discontentedness. This is the problem that you're experiencing, is that your mind's shaken up. It's unsteady, it's uncalm, it's experiencing those conditioned feelings, conditioned pleasant feelings, painful feelings, and neither painful nor pleasant. Because when your mind's shaken up like that, you can't make wise decisions. And now when you make unwise decisions, it produces unwholesome results for you. So this is the problem that each unenlightened being is experiencing. The second noble truth is explaining the cause of this. Discontentedness is caused by our own cravings, desires, attachments, because the mind wants everything to be permanent, when in reality, everything in the world is impermanent. So I'm going to say that a few times and give you examples to help you see this. The discontentedness, the conditioned pleasant feelings, painful feelings, and neither painful nor pleasant, is caused by craving, desire, attachment, that longing, that yearning, that chasing after the objects of your affection. Because the mind wants things to be permanent, when in reality you live in an impermanent world. So, for example, think back to a boyfriend or girlfriend that you got back together, or that you got together with. When you guys first got together, you were probably so happy, probably so excited. This person's showing you affection. They're calling you and checking in on you. They're maybe inviting you to dinner and movies. Maybe you're going to the park and having nice walks. Maybe you're having great conversations. Maybe you're even having intimate contact. And you get all these pleasant feelings from this experience. But then over time, the relationship deteriorated and you guys broke up. Now you might have been angry or sad or frustrated. Maybe you were lonely or bored or missing this person. This wasn't your love that was causing that. This is your mind's craving, desire, attachment. Your mind's holding on and craving permanence. The mind can only be happy when it gets what it wants and what it expects. So as long as you're in a relationship, there was a certain amount of comfort there. But when your mind experienced this impermanence, it didn't understand that. It was holding on and craving permanence, wanting this relationship to be permanent, when in reality it was always impermanent from the very beginning. Even if you guys were together for the rest of your life, you guys would have died. And now you guys' relationship was over. If you had someone close to you that has died, like mom or dad or grandma or grandpa, brothers or sisters, you might have grieved or been sorrowful when they passed away. This wasn't your love that was causing that. That's the mind holding on and craving permanence. Of course, you're not a bad person if you grieved or were sorrowful. It's just what the mind does in the unenlightened state, because it craves permanence. It can only be happy if it gets what it wants and what it expects. So if grandma or grandpa's alive, the mind's happy. It likes that. But then when you're not experiencing that, when the mind is experiencing the death of this person and they're now impermanent, they're not in your life anymore, the mind struggles with that. And it has this anger, or frustration, or sadness, or grief. You can see it if you've ever been to a wedding, right? If you went to a wedding, you might have seen people that are grieving at a wedding, right? Parents might be grieving, or brothers and sisters might be crying at a wedding. Here's this person going off into the world with someone else, and mom and dad and grandma, grandpa, brothers and sisters are crying. Well, it's not love that's causing that, because this is wonderful. Two people are coming together. They're going off into the world together. They're starting a life together. That's wonderful. But no, people are crying at a wedding. It's like, that's my brother, that's my sister, right? How dare you take them away? That's what their minds may be thinking, right? They're holding on. Or if you've seen children get dropped off at school, maybe like in kindergarten or university, if you could think back to when you got dropped off, maybe your parents were crying, or maybe you were crying, right? This is the mind holding on and craving permanence. This child, this parent's mind is holding on, and now this person's going off into the world to get an education. Again, if it's love, why would you cry the fact that your child is getting an education? Because love is, I would like to see this being be well. Right? That's not what's causing the sadness or the anger or the grief or the sorrow when someone's going off to school. It's the mind holding on and craving permanence. Let me give you some examples that don't involve relationships, because you might be able to see it better there. Let's think if you got a brand new car. Maybe you've been saving this money for a very long time. It's like the ideal car that you've been saving for 10 years. You've been shoving money under your mattress in your house, and now you finally got enough money to go pay for this car in cash. And you went down to the dealership and you gave them the money, and you drove off the parking lot with this brand new car. And everyone's like, wow, look at him, he's so successful. Wow, look at her, she's so successful. And you're so proud with your brand new car, and you drive it and you park it at the store, and you go inside, and then you come out and there's a scratch on your car. Oh my gosh, you might be so crushed. You've been saving for this car for 10 years and now there's a scratch on it. You might be so angry or frustrated. It's not the scratch that's causing it. And it's not the person who scratched your car. That's not what's causing the anger and frustration. It's the mind's craving for permanence. The mind wants this car to look permanently beautiful, when in reality it's not possible. This paint is going to fade on the car. The tires are going to need to be changed. The upholstery is going to get ripped and torn. It's only a matter of time before this car starts changing. But the mind craves permanence. So one of the ways to say this is that the mind craves permanence. Another way to say it is that the mind doesn't like impermanence. It doesn't like change. That's why if you look at your life, in the situations where you've had the most difficulties, it's when things were changing. When you were changing jobs, when you were changing living locations, when you were changing relationships, those were the biggest struggles for you in your life. And you can see that for yourself if you look closely at it. Because when you don't understand this second noble truth, the mind will become unskillful. Because what the mind thinks in the unenlightened state is that it's other people who are causing you to be angry and frustrated. But what I'm teaching you is that it's your own mind that's causing this. This is where you can have a real breakthrough to being able to see that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings. Because as long as you think it's other people that are causing these feelings and you don't understand the second noble truth, you'll tend to become unskillful. You'll tend to push people away, or you'll push a situation away. This is called aversion, where you might have pushed away friends or family out of your life, thinking that that's going to solve the problem. But you can see that didn't solve the problem, because if they were the true cause of your problem, when you push them out of your life, you'd be peaceful and joyful from that point forward, because you just solved your problem, right? But you can see that that's not the case. You still get angry. You still get frustrated. You haven't solved your problem. Or the second thing you'll do is you'll be bitter and harsh and hostile to people through your intentions, your speech, and your actions. It's almost like an animal growling and roaring at another animal, trying to fear it into doing things your way. Or the third thing you'll do when you don't understand the third noble, or the second noble truth, is you'll tend to put expectations on people, try to pressure them and convince them to do things your way. This is the mind trying to get its cravings fulfilled, because it wants everybody to do it this way. And if everybody does it this way, the mind's happy. But if it doesn't, the mind experiences those other feelings, painful feelings like anger, sadness, and frustration. So the mind's trying to create this little bubble that if people do it my way, I'm happy. But if they don't, I'm going to push them out of my bubble. Or I'm going to yell and holler and scream at them and try to fear them into doing it my way. Or I'm going to start putting pressure on them and expectations on them to try to convince them to do it my way, right? So you might be doing this to others where you're pushing people away, being bitter, harsh, and hostile to them, or putting expectations on people. But people also might be doing this to you too, because this is not knowledge that people widely understand in the world about the second noble truth, that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings because it's craving permanence. So remember, you can't believe anything that I say. Don't believe anything I write in books. Don't believe anything anybody else says. You need to independently verify it for yourself, because what I just shared with you is the intellectual part. So now move it into reflection. Think about a recent situation where you've been angry or sad or frustrated or some other discontent feeling. It could have been this morning or yesterday or last week. Look at that situation with these fresh eyes. What was it that you wanted? What did you expect? What were you longing, yearning for? And if you would have gotten it, you would have been happy. But because you didn't get what you wanted or expected, the mind was angry or sad or frustrated. If you can see it, you can have a real breakthrough to being able to see once and for all it's your own mind that's causing these feelings. But if you can't see it, let me know and I will help you, because I've had plenty of people over the years that needed help with this. I'll give you one story of this. I one time had a student that contacted me and he said, David, I really need your help. And I said, okay, sure, I'll help you. What's going on? They said, well, I know that you teach that it's my own mind that's causing these feelings, but I'm sure it's my wife that causes these feelings. And I said, okay, well, what's going on? They said, well, I went to work the other day and my house looked beautiful. And when I went to work, I worked really hard for about 8 or 10 hours. And I came home and she had this craft project all over the house. And I walked in and I got frustrated and I got angry. They said, how did I cause this discontentedness? How did I cause the anger and frustration? Because I wasn't even there. She's the one who messed up the house. Didn't she cause me to be angry and frustrated? And I said, no, it was your own mind. You were craving permanence. The house looked a certain way when you went to work and you expected it to look exactly the same when you came home. The only thing you experienced here was change. It's just impermanence. When it goes from sun to rain, the only thing that happens there is change. When your bank account balance is here and you're happy, and it goes down here and you're sad and frustrated, the only thing that's happened is change. But the mind craves permanence. So you can see that there isn't even another person involved. When it goes from sun to rain and someone gets frustrated or angry about that, there's no other person even involved there. All that is change. So you need to be able to see this for yourself. And where you have difficulties, let me know, because the mind is craving permanence. It's wanting things to be permanent. Every single time you've ever been in an argument or you've been angry and frustrated with people, it's been your mind the entire time. And I know you firmly believe that it's other people that have been causing this. We will argue, we will fight, and we will yell and holler and scream and tell people that if you don't stop doing this, I'm going to keep getting angry. But it's the mind craving permanence. And when you see this, it's a wonderful thing, because now you can actually apply the real solution. As long as you keep thinking that it's other people that are causing these feelings, you'll never actually be able to fix it. Now, this doesn't mean that the other person isn't doing something unwise, because they truly could be doing something that is unwise. But that's not what's causing the anger or frustration. It's because the mind craves for everybody to do it this way. They're longing, yearning for it to people to do it this way. And there's this permanence that the mind wants. So when you can see this, it's very helpful, because if you can see that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings, that means you can eliminate it. Whereas if it's everyone else who's causing these feelings, you can't fix it, because you can't train 8 billion people to do things your way. That would be a massive effort. You'd have to have training programs all over the world. You'd have to have people agree that it's your way is the right way. And there's new people being born all the time. You'd have to have materials to print out and teach everybody your way of doing things, right? And that's not the world we live in, right? We live in an impermanent world where everybody's going to do things differently. There's only one person in the world who does things your way 100% of the time. Do you know who this person is that does things your way 100% of the time? Yeah, yourself, right? So if you can only be happy when people do things your way, you can only be happy with yourself. And you might even have trouble doing that sometimes, right? So the mind is craving this permanence. It does not like impermanence. It doesn't like change. That's what the unenlightened mind experiences. Well, the third noble truth helps you understand that you can eliminate this discontentedness by eliminating the craving, desire, attachment, the longing, the yearning, the chasing after the objects of your affection. Well, sometimes when I say that, people are a bit confused. They say, well, if I'm not doing that, wouldn't I swing all the way to the other side where I'm dull and lethargic and complacent and lazy? Well, you might, but that's not what the Buddha is teaching you. The Buddha is teaching you to come to the middle where you can gradually pursue your goals and objectives with enthusiasm and ambition without chasing and longing, yearning, and forming your feelings on whether you get it or not. But he's also not teaching you to be over here where you're dull and lethargic and lazy. So the mind needs to learn how to come to the middle to gradually pursue things through goals, objectives, or interests. So the mind in the unenlightened state is holding on. That's what the second noble truth is explaining, is that it's holding on and craving permanence. The third noble truth is explaining you need to train your mind to let go. You need to let go of craving, desire, attachment, because that's what produces the peace and that's what produces the joy. So you can independently verify that too. Because think back to the boyfriend or girlfriend that you broke up with. You were maybe angry or frustrated or lonely or bored or missing that person. But at some point, your mind let go. You were like, you know what? If he wants to be with someone else, so be it. And you let go. And that's where your peace and your joy came back. Or you're like, you know what? If she wants to live in another part of the world, okay, so be it. And you let go. And that's where your peace and your joy came back. But for those few weeks or those few months where your mind was holding on, you were frustrated, you were angry, but your mind needs to let go. And that's what's going to train it to be able to get to this peace and joy. But the mind doesn't know how to let go. That's where the fourth noble truth comes in. The path to eliminating discontentedness is the Eightfold Path. This is the complete perfect plan that's going to train your mind how to let go. And it starts with right view, because having the right view is to understand that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings. Having wrong view would be to blame other people. If you blame other people for the feelings that you experience, you'll never eliminate them. You'll go around being angry and frustrated the rest of your life. You'll just keep pushing people away. You'll be bitter, harsh, and hostile to them, and you'll put expectations on them, trying to pressure them to do things your way. But when you establish right view, you'll start looking inward to try to understand, what are you longing for? What are you yearning for? You'll start being more introspective. So for example, say you show up to the airport and you're so excited to go on a trip and you think you're leaving in about an hour because that's when your flight's scheduled to leave. But you show up and the people at the ticket counter, when you're checking in your bags, they say, sorry, sir, sorry, ma'am, you can't check in yet. Your flight's not leaving for 3 hours. It's been delayed. And you notice the anger coming up. Well, instead of sitting in the waiting area, being frustrated and angry, blaming the airline company, start looking inward. What is your mind longing, yearning for? What are you wanting? What are you expecting? I want every airplane to take off on time, right? That's what the mind's longing, yearning for. Or maybe you're on your way to Thailand and it's like, man, I can't wait to get to that sticky rice and that mango and sticky rice. Oh, I can taste it already. Or I can't wait to get to those massages. Or maybe it's the elephants that you want to play with, right? Your mind's just longing, yearning for that stuff, right? So you got to look inward and see, what is the mind longing, yearning for? What is the craving? Because when you eliminate that, now you understand, well, of course the plane is delayed because there's weather issues, there's maintenance issues, there's crew issues. This is all impermanence. Not every flight can take off on time. It's not possible, right? So with you establishing right view, you'll start looking inward. You'll start being introspective. And this is what's going to help you to be able to now move further on the path. So I'm going to pause here and see if you guys have questions on the Four Noble Truths, because this is such an important teaching to make sure you really understand it before we go any further on the path. Is there anybody that has questions about this or needs help verifying that it's their own mind that's causing these feelings? Questions? Okay. I don't see any online either. Okay, so now let's go to the next one, which is right intention. Each one of these don't take the same amount of time to teach. This one takes a long time because it's a big piece. So right intention is actually really straightforward. Here's the words of the Buddha. In what, monks, is right intention? The intention of renunciation, the intention of non-ill will, the intention of harmlessness. This, monks, is called right intention. Okay, so there's three things here that the Buddha is teaching you. Intention of renunciation, non-ill will, and harmlessness. What the intention of renunciation is the mind needs to be willing to let go, right? Because that's what the mind's doing that you learn about in right view is that the mind's holding on, right? It's craving permanence. So you need to be willing to let go of your false ideas, your false beliefs, your false opinions, and your false views. Because if your mind is experiencing anger and sadness and frustration and all these other things, then there's certain false beliefs, opinions, and views that you have in your mind because you need to be able to cultivate wisdom. And you also need to be willing to let go of your unwholesomeness. There's a certain amount of unwholesome moral conduct in the unenlightened state. So the teachings of the Buddha are teaching you to eliminate your false beliefs, false opinions, false views, right? But you're not bringing in new beliefs in order to get rid of your false beliefs. You're bringing in wisdom. When you see that there's certain wisdom about this world that your mind doesn't understand and you've been believing a certain thing your entire life, and now this wisdom is showing you that you haven't understood, you need to be willing to let that go. That's what it means to renunciate something, is to let it go. So one of the very first false opinions, false views, false beliefs that you need to eliminate is the belief that other people are causing you to be angry. That's one of the very first things you need to eliminate, because we walk around with that for a long time, thinking that everybody else is causing us to be angry. But when you see this wisdom that you've independently verified, the Four Noble Truths, and you see that it's true, you need to renunciate that and be willing to let that go. Okay, and there's others, false ideas, false beliefs, and false opinions that you're going to need to let go of too, because that lack of wisdom is what's keeping your mind in the unenlightened state. When we say awaken, you need to awaken to the wisdom of these natural laws. But you can't bring in new wisdom if you're still holding on to your false ideas and false beliefs and false opinions. So that's why once you establish right view, the very next thing is you need to renunciate certain false opinions and views. And you need to renunciate your unwholesome moral conduct, because there's a certain amount of moral conduct that you're putting out in your relationships that is causing difficulties for you. So you need to be willing to let that go. Then there's the intention of non-ill will. In English, whenever you see a double negative like this, that is a positive, right? So saying the intention of non-ill will is to say to have the intention of goodwill, which is loving kindness, where you have a genuine interest in seeing all beings be well. The opposite of that is ill will, where you would have animosity, bitterness, anger, hatred, and frustration and agitation. You need to have the intention or the thinking or the thought of goodwill towards all beings, where you have a genuine interest in seeing them be well. And then there's the intention of harmlessness, where you're disinterested or incapable of causing harm. Because whenever you cause harm, harm is going to come back to you. Now, it's important to note that you cause your own discontentedness, but so does everybody else. When your mom and dad and brothers and sisters, your life partner is experiencing anger and frustration, you're not causing that. Their mind is causing it themselves. You can't cause somebody else to be angry and frustrated, but you can cause them harm. Causing someone harm would be to cause harm to their physical body, their material possessions, or their reputation. If you cause harm to someone's physical body, their material possessions, or reputation, that harm is going to come back to you. So you're disinterested in causing harm to others, because if you cause harm, that harm is going to come back to you. So that's what the intention of harmlessness is, where you're disinterested or incapable of causing harm to others. So this is the intention of renunciation, non-ill will, and harmlessness. So just to summarize this, and then I'll open up to any questions, is right view is the Four Noble Truths. Understanding that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings, that it's craving, desire, attachment, the mind longing, yearning. You're going to need to accept responsibility for your own feelings, your intentions, your speech, and your actions. Because oftentimes people blame these things on other people, and you need to be able to see that it's your own mind that's doing these things. And now you can just accept responsibility for that and now aim to improve and make it better. It's not about fault or blame. It's about just seeing true reality and now making it better through wise decisions. Then there's right intention, which is the intention of renunciation, willing to let go of your false ideas, false beliefs, false opinions and views, to have the intention or the thinking or the thought of non-ill will, which is goodwill towards all beings, and having the intention of harmlessness, where you're disinterested in causing harm to others, understanding that any harm that you put out, it's going to come back to you. So any questions on this? No questions? Okay. So, you have a question? Yes, ma'am.
To let go if the thoughts keep popping up and coming back?
That's what I'm going to teach you in the mental discipline section. I'm going to take a break here for you guys. In the mental discipline section, that's where you're going to learn that.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's take a break. It's now 10:40. Let's take a break up to 11 o'clock, give you guys a 20-minute break. And when you come back, I'm going to continue on our journey here with the Eightfold Path, helping you to understand each aspect of the path. So enjoy your time, and I'll see you guys in about 20 minutes, okay? Right. Okay, so welcome back to you guys. There's a question coming in on Zoom from Max. So I'm going to answer this one because it's related to the Four Noble Truths and craving. He says, craving seems like a natural occurrence of the mind at birth. Is realizing that I am not the craving had nothing to do with this craving to begin with, help to distance myself from it. In other words, using the teaching of non-self to distance myself from craving. You could, because that craving is not you. But yes, ever since birth, we had craving. That's why we came out of our mother's womb crying, right? We don't come out of the womb laughing and joking like, wow, this is such a good time. That was like a water slide, right? No, because we're inside the womb. We're in there. We've got the placenta hooked up. We're getting the food and the water and everything. We've got the whole place to ourselves. And now our mind is in there and we're craving. We have this permanence that the mind's craving. So when we experience impermanence, that we go from inside the womb to outside the womb, right away we're discontent as soon as we come into the world because of craving. So it's there from birth, but that's not who we are. And you can make sure that you think about that if you would like to use that, Max, as part of helping you to distance yourself from cravings and realize non-self is that you are not these cravings. These are just contents. We were just talking about at a break. These are just contents that are inside the mind. One of the ways you might think about it is like a cardboard box. And inside that cardboard box, there's certain contents and there's cravings and residual memories inside the mind. The mind is represented by the cardboard box. The craving and residual memories is the contents of the box. So that is not you. The contents of the box are not you, but those cravings are in the mind. And yeah, you can distance yourself from craving that way and understand that it's not you, it's not who you are, because people will tend to cling to that. And that's essentially what personal existence view is teaching you, is that it's just personal existence view is just another type of craving, right? There's certain cravings and the mind's just holding on and clinging to this body and this mind, and it's craving and clinging, and you got to train it to let go. And that's what the Buddha's helping you with. You have a question, Keisha?
Hello. Okay. I think my question relates to the last slide, but basically when someone puts their expectations and are trying to fulfill their cravings onto you and you push back in a polite way, but they don't necessarily like it, how do you deal with that, I guess?
You don't have to push back. Right? If somebody was trying to put expectations on you and they're like, Keisha, you should do it this way, you should do it that way, you should do it that way, just walk away. Don't allow your mind to adopt it. Now, I have done things before, like I've gone to my family, like when I was young and I wasn't practicing these teachings so well. And I told them like, hey, look, guys, I'm not here to meet your expectations. That's not what my life is all about. I'm going to do things my way, and whatever expectations you put on me, just understand I'm not going to abide by those things. Now, I've done that, but what that tends to do is it creates conflict, and it's not necessarily wise because I was young. I didn't practice the teachings, because remember, their mind's craving, they're longing, yearning, they're wanting you to do things a certain way. And when you say, no, I'm not going to do it that way, their craving isn't getting fulfilled. And now they get angry and frustrated. They think you're the one who's causing their anger. And now they're either going to push you aside, they're going to be bitter, harsh, and hostile to you, or they're going to start pressuring you more. They're going to start putting more expectations. That's what my family did. When I told them that I wasn't going to meet their expectations, they just kept trying to put more expectations on me, where eventually they realized that I wasn't going to do what they said, and they just stopped putting expectations on me. But it took several years for them to get to that point. So the better thing to do is when people are trying to put expectations on you is just let it roll off your shoulder, right?
Don't say anything.
Don't say anything. Just walk away. Now, if you're in a life partnership and you guys are helping each other on the path and you're both on the path, you can politely say things like, this sounds a bit like expectations to me. Is that what this is? And then you guys can talk about it. But when it comes to other people, oftentimes their ego's involved, they're having craving. That's why they're putting expectations on you to begin with, because of their craving. And now when their cravings aren't getting fulfilled, you're going to see they become discontent, and they don't realize that that's the case. But when you're in a life partnership and both of you are learning and practicing the teachings, you might actually aspire to talk about this, and you might actually see it as a benefit that you guys are helping each other to see that it appears that this should be expectations. So like my wife, when I was helping her, she would sometimes say things to me, and I would say, are you asking me to do that, or are you telling me to do it? And she would say, oh, I'm asking you to do it. And I would say, oh, okay, well, if you're asking me to do it, sure, I'll do that for you. But if you were telling me to do it, I actually wouldn't do it. Right. So this was my way of helping her, because at that time, even though she said she was asking me to do it, in her voice, you could tell that there was a bit of a demanding and controlling tone to the way she was talking. So because she was being demanding and controlling, and I've noticed that tone a little bit, that's why I said, are you asking me to do this, or are you telling me to do it? And then she kind of like, you could see her eyes kind of going around in her head. And she was like, I'm asking you to do it. And I was like, oh, okay, well, since you're asking me to do it, sure, I'll do it. I was like, well, when do you want me to do it by? Right. That was me trying to see what she was going to say. Because if she said, well, I want you to do it right now. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to do it tomorrow then. Right. Because that's the mind craving it. I want it right now. That's the expectation. Right. So I've done those kinds of things, but it's just asking a question skillfully. Are you asking, or are you telling me? But then the person themselves, they can also not be really in touch with what's really truly going on in their own mind. And that's where you can kind of like test the waters a bit. Because if they're truly asking and not telling, then that means they could be content if you did it now, if you did it 3 hours from now, if you did it 3 days from now, they would be completely content. Whereas if they have a controlling, demanding expectation, they're going to want it right now, and they can only be happy if you do it when they want it. So I would intentionally, when she would ask me to do things, I would sometimes delay it just to make sure her mind wasn't having craving, desire, attachment, and she wouldn't become discontent.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hello. When you were sort of saying there, with you don't want to say anything to avoid conflict, like my view of conflict is that it's natural and it's okay to have conflict, so that you can sort of both get to a point where you understand each other better. You know, you might have differing opinions, but conflict sort of helps you understand that other person's opinion. Doesn't mean you need to be aggressive or rude in what you say. So yeah, with avoiding conflict, why should we avoid conflict? Because conflict is where you're just disagreeing with each other for the sake of disagreeing with each other, for maybe trying to express your opinions and views and trying to convince the other person to do things your way, right? This comes from the ego. Instead, what you're talking about is there's going to be disagreements. That's normal. But you can learn how to be polite, kind, friendly, and respectful while having a disagreement. A conflict is something different, where there's now this bitterness and harshness and hostility, and people are getting angry and frustrated with each other. That's what you're not interested in, because that's just going to produce unwholesome results. But there's absolutely going to be disagreements, because there's only one person who will do things your way 100% of the time, and it's going to be you. So in any kind of relationship, there's going to be one person who would like to do things one way. There's going to be another person who would like to do things another way. But now we can learn how to discuss and talk and come to a conclusion about whatever decision is going to be made here. So conflict is more harsh, more bitter, more hostile, where there's arguing involved. That's what you're not interested in. You would like to have discussions which stem from disagreements, and that's normal because of impermanence. Not everyone's going to agree. And now you just talk it out and you discuss what is the solution here. Because sometimes you're going to sit down with, in this case, a life partner, and both of people will talk, and one person will change their mind and you'll now do it their way. Or they'll change their mind and they're going to do it your way.
but that's coming through discussion, right? It's not coming from trying to convince the person. Or you might actually blend your ideas together and then come up with a joint solution. Or you could also sit down together and conversate very politely. And at the end of the conversation, one person decides to do it one way and one person decides to do it another way. And that's okay too. And that's what the mind needs to become comfortable with. But with conflict, the mind's not that way, that there's now going to be this harshness and bitterness. And now we're trying to advocate and convince each other that I'm right and you're wrong. And that's what you're not interested in. It's just going to lead to further complications. Okay, so now we'll continue on with the rest of the path here. That we have been talking about right view and right intention, but now we're going to move to right speech, right action, right livelihood. This is the moral conduct section. Whenever you're learning things from the moral conduct section with the teachings of the Buddha, whether it's this teaching or any other teaching where he's talking about moral conduct, he's teaching you the natural law of karma. Sometimes people look at the moral conduct section as rules and commandments, and that would be very unwise to think of it that way, because the Buddha doesn't teach based in rules or commandments. Because if there were rules, that sounds like it's black and white, and there's only one way to do it. And now there's somebody that's going to come in and enforce those rules. But instead, what the Buddha is teaching you is part of right view. You start to understand that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings. Because I'm sure you've been in knockdown, drag out arguments where you've been adamantly trying to convince this other person in this conflict that they have to stop doing what they're doing, or else you're going to continue to get angry. But when you learn right view and you realize that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings, then the last thing you're interested in is being bitter and harsh and hostile to people, because you realize that it's just damaging your relationships, and it's actually coming from your own mind. Because oftentimes people feel justified in their bitterness and harshness and hostility. They might say, like, that person deserved that, where in reality, it's just all coming from your own mind and it's damaging your relationships. So what the Buddha is doing is he's teaching you this cause and effect, or this action and result, the results of your decisions, because it's your life, it's your decisions, and it's your results. Whenever you're making decisions about how you interact in the world, it's going to produce certain results. So what he's teaching you in the moral conduct section is the natural law of karma. He's teaching you this cause and effect of what are the wise ways to interact with people so that you can develop harmonious relationships with the people around you, because the harmonious relationships are going to produce wonderful experiences for all of you guys, right? So make sure as you're learning moral conduct, whether it's here or any other teaching from the Buddha on moral conduct, that you understand he's showing you this cause and effect. Even though we call it right speech, right action, and right livelihood, you might think about it as wise speech or wise action or wise livelihood, because he's showing you the wisdom behind the natural law of karma. So here's what he teaches on speech. He says, in what, monks, is right speech or wise speech? Refraining from lying, refraining from slander, refraining from harsh speech, refraining from frivolous speech. This is called right speech. So remember what the Buddha is teaching you as part of the Eightfold Path is to eliminate craving, desire, attachment, because that's what's going to eliminate your discontentedness. All these forms of speech are based in craving, desire, attachment, and it's going to produce unwholesome results for you because of the natural law of karma. So for example, when we're lying, right? Think about when you were lying as a kid. There was some craving, desire, attachment that you had. There was something you were longing, yearning for. And if you told the truth, your mind thought, I'm not going to get what I want in this situation. So I'm going to lie in order to get what I want, right? So that's the craving, desire, attachment. So if you're telling lies, that means you still have craving, desire, attachment in your mind. And when you tell lies based in craving, it's going to produce unwholesome results. That's why when people discover our lies, then people find us to be untrustworthy, undependable, and unreliable. And our relationships are impacted because of that. So that's why the Buddha teaches you to eliminate lying, to speak the truth. And now your mind can be peaceful. Because how can you get to peace and joy if you're always lying? Because if you remember back when we were kids and we were doing a lot of lying, we had to keep our lies straight. And that was really hard, right? You told this person one lie, you told this person another lie, you told this person another lie. You had to keep all this straight. And how can you get to peace and joy when your mind's obsessively trying to figure this out? Then there's refraining from slander. When someone's slandering or gossiping, this is degrading or diminishing people's reputation. There's an underlying craving there. It's like, I want to look good in front of other people. And if I diminish others and make them look bad, it's going to make me look good. That's what the mind thinks with its lack of wisdom. There's a craving, desire, attachment there. And when you're gossiping and slandering other people, it's actually producing unwholesome results for you. That at the height of this, the natural law of karma is that you can be murdered. You can be killed. There's been people that have been murdered and killed because of gossip and slander, right? You damage someone's reputation, people are going to want to cause you harm because you're causing harm. At the very least, if you're gossiping and slandering, when your back's turned and you got these people used to gossiping and slandering, what do you think they're going to be gossiping and slandering about when you're gone? They're going to be gossiping and slandering about you, right? So if you don't like people gossiping and slandering about you, you're going to need to eliminate gossip and slander. The way that the mind thinks with gossip and slander is it's kind of like going into a dark room and everybody's got a candle and the mind's like, my candle will shine brighter if I put out everybody else's candle. Let me put out everyone else's candle and make my candle shine bright. But the way you've got to think about it is, no, we're in a dark room. We would like everybody's candle to be shining bright, right? So no need to gossip and slander and diminish other people. Instead, don't allow your mind to do that because that'll help you eliminate craving, desire, attachment in the mind. Then there's harsh speech. What this is your tone, your tempo, and your word choice. If you have craving, desire, attachment in your mind, you'll speak somewhat harsh and hostile and bitter in certain situations. That's because of the craving, desire, attachment. So you're going to need to learn how to speak gentle, paying attention to your tone, tempo, and word choice. And some of you guys speak more than one language. You're going to need to look at all those different languages that you speak and figure out how to speak with clarity with this gentle speech, where you're speaking, your tone, tempo, and word choice is nice and gentle, right? Because in relationships where you are having the most craving, desire, attachment, that's where you'll find it to be the most difficult. You'll find it really difficult to speak gentle with your parents, with your brothers and sisters, with your life partner, with your children. That's why, because you have the deepest cravings there. It's not love that's causing that. That's the mind's craving. So you can get rid of that. And now you can learn to speak gentle, and it's going to improve your relationships. Then there's frivolous speech. This is also based in craving. What frivolous speech is, or sometimes we call it idle chatter, it's unpurposeful, unbeneficial speech. So if you've ever been around somebody or you've ever been this person where you're in a conversation that's not really a conversation at all, it's just kind of like yada, 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 yada. One person's talking, right? Yada, 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 yada. It's like 5, 10, 20 minutes. It's like, oh my gosh, when is this person going to be quiet? Like, when can I talk? Right? So it's not really a conversation. It's really broadcasting. They're broadcasting to you, right? So if you went around and did this, it's coming from your craving, and it's going to produce unwholesome results for you because you're going to be more and more less influential. People aren't going to be influenced by the things you have to say because they're sitting there having to listen to you for 20 or 30 minutes. And now it's like, oh my gosh, this isn't even a conversation, right? So you'd like to eliminate all of these because this is based in craving. That's what's going to help you eliminate your cravings when you eliminate your lying, slander, harsh speech, and frivolous speech. But it's going to take you time to dial this in, especially in the relationships where you're the closest with people. It's going to take you time to dial all this in. And then once you get this really well practiced, then you'd like to go deeper into this with the 5 factors of well-spoken speech. This is a teaching that plugs into the Eightfold Path that gives you more details on how to practice wise speech. So here, the Buddha is teaching you to speak at the proper time. What you say is true, gentle, beneficial, and with a mind of loving kindness. Speaking at the proper time is to make sure you're not interrupting people. If you're interrupting people, there's a craving there. It's like, oh, I can't wait to talk. Your mind just wants to jump in there, right? And you don't like it when people interrupt you. So people aren't going to like it when you interrupt them. And it's coming from craving. So if you're going to get rid of craving, you need to learn to speak at the proper time. But also speaking at the proper time is to make sure your mind's prepared to talk. If you're angry, if you're frustrated, if you're agitated or annoyed, it's not the proper time to talk. The only thing that's going to come out of your mind is frustration and agitation. That's what's going to come out of your voice. And you can see when that has occurred, it ended up with broken relationships, or you lost a job, or something like that. Something unwholesome happened for you because you were speaking at the improper time when your mind was angry and frustrated. So you like your mind to be calm whenever you're speaking. And then the third part of this is to make sure that the other person's mind is calm and peaceful as well. Because if they're angry, if they're frustrated, if they're agitated or annoyed, it's not the proper time to talk, because nothing's going to get in. Right? You're not going to be able to have a decent conversation. So that's the proper time. When we speak the truth, that's covered up here about eliminating lying. You'd like to make sure you eliminate deliberate lying, but also you like to eliminate like spreading unfounded conspiracy theories and things that you haven't really verified for yourself. You'd like to verify each thing before you say it. That before you say something, you make sure you know that it's true. Not that it's just not a deliberate lie, but it's also that it's something that's based in truth. Because then you'll be a truth speaker, reliable, dependable. People will find you to be trustworthy. Then the speaking gentle is also handled up here as well, that you like to pay attention to your tone, tempo, and word choice in the way that you speak with people. Using words like please and thank you and yes, sir, yes, ma'am, things like this. This will really help soften up the way that you interact with people. And again, you're going to find this to be the most difficult with your parents, with your siblings, with your life partner, with your children, because that's where you usually have the strongest attachments. So be sure you pay attention to that and you work on it closely. Then they're speaking beneficially. This is about your purpose. You would like to have a purposeful conversation. This is to eliminate frivolous speech. So with beneficial, this is more about the method of how you communicate. You would like to be clear, concise, and precise in the way that you speak. Whereas if you're just kind of rambling chit chat and just kind of like, people have to work really hard to understand what it is that you're saying, you're going to be uninfluential and people aren't going to be willing to really spend time to listen and understand. So if you're going to speak, you like to speak beneficially, which is more about the method of how you speak in terms of being clear and concise and precise. Then you'd like to wrap all of this in a mind of loving kindness. The opposite of loving kindness is inner hate. If you speak with inner hate, it's going to produce unwholesome results for you, unwholesome karma, right? This natural law of karma is cause and effect. It's a sequence of events. If you're bitter and harsh and hostile with your speech, being hateful and vindictive, then it's going to produce unwholesome results for you. So you'd like to wrap everything in a mind of loving kindness. So these are the 5 factors of well-spoken speech. But remember, you can't believe any of this stuff. You need to independently verify it. So what I just shared with you is the intellectual part. But now move it into reflection. Think about conversations that haven't gone well for you, right? You can look at each one of these and you can see that you weren't practicing them or someone else wasn't practicing them and the conversation didn't go well. But then also look at the flip side of this, because you've had plenty of conversations that have gone well. Maybe some of you had some conversations that break. Maybe they went really well for you. And you can see that you guys were practicing these, because remember, these are natural laws. They're affecting you, whether you're aware of them or not. So in certain situations, you have spoken at the proper time. You do speak the truth. You have spoken gently. You spoke beneficially, and you spoke with a mind of loving kindness. And that's why that conversation went well for you. So you can independently verify this through your own experiences. Now, while the Buddha calls this right speech, because that's all that was going on at the time was speech, we might actually think about this as right communication, because we have much more than just speech. We have communication with text messages, emails, social media posts, voicemails, all kinds of ways of communicating with people. So for example, you'd like to apply these 5 factors of well-spoken speech in all of your communication. Because if you went into a job interview and you knocked it out of the park with your speech, but they checked your social media and you're bitter and harsh and hostile on your social media, you're probably not going to get the job. Right? Or say you get really angry and frustrated and you go over to your keyboard and you're pounding out an email to somebody. That's not the proper time to be communicating, right? So maybe what you do is hit save on that email instead of send. Because once you hit send, it's going off into the world, it's producing harm, and now this harm is going to come back to you, right? So hit save on that email. So it's not the proper time to be communicating. So while the Buddha calls this right speech, we might think of it as right communication. In this book, Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment, which I recommend you guys to get it, I've got a lot of details in here about speech because you can do a lot of harm with your speech. And I've got all the details of the 5 factors of well-spoken speech with examples in there so that you guys can see how to actually practice this closely. But then I also have a couple little tips like this, that this right speech, you need to be able to speak polite, kind, friendly, and respectful. And this might be a way for you to actually think about right speech, because in detail, you're going to need to know the 5 factors of well-spoken speech, and that's what you're going to need to dial in closer and closer. But between now and then, when you're practicing right speech to perfection, there's going to be situations where you can't quite remember the 5 factors because you're going to need to study them, and you're going to need to bring it into the forefront of your mind. In fact, I used to look at them in the morning, and then I would go out and have meetings, and then in the afternoon, I would look at them again and see how I was doing. Where did I do well? Where did I not do well? And I need to improve. And then in the afternoon, I would go out and do my meetings. And then I would look in the evening and I would look again, right? But there's going to be certain situations where you might not be able to do that. Maybe you're on the phone with your mom and you feel the anger coming up and you're getting really frustrated. And you're like, hold on a second, Mom. I've got to check my book here. Oh boy, am I angry. I know there's something in here from the Buddha that's going to help me. Hold on a second, right? You're not going to be able to do that, right? So if you can remember in the heat of the moment to speak polite, kind, friendly, and respectful, this will help you. But ultimately, you're going to need to know the 5 factors of well-spoken speech. That's the natural laws. But things like this can really help you, okay? Then there's right action. Here's the words of the Buddha. In what, monks, is right action? Refraining from taking life, refraining from taking what is not given, refraining from sexual misconduct. This is called right action. So he's talking about 3 impactful bodily actions here. He's not giving you an exhaustive list. It's not possible. But all of these things are based in craving. He gives you more details on this with the 5 precepts. I'm going to share this with you tomorrow as part of our class, where this is going to expand this for you, because people might look at this and be like, well, what's sexual misconduct? I have no idea what that is. That's where the 5 precepts come in. The Buddha really expands it for you. He helps you to be able to see things like having sex with minors, having sex without consent, meaning raping somebody, having sex outside of relationships that you're currently committed to. This is what's going to cause difficulties and problems in your life. It's important to note that he didn't include same-gender relationships as sexual misconduct. Sometimes people think that that would be the case, but that's not true, because 2 loyal, loving, consenting adults choosing to have sex with each other, they're not actually causing any harm to anybody. And if you understand the universal truth of impermanence, then you understand ever since the beginning of time, there's never been a time where everybody had sex with the opposite gender. It's never been the case ever since the beginning of humanity. There's been some people who have sex with the opposite gender and some people who have sex with the same gender. It's been going on ever since the beginning of humanity. This is how wise this individual was, that 2,500 years ago, he already understood that there's no harm in same gender relationships. So we're going to talk about that when we get to the 5 precepts, and you'll be able to see that more in more detail, as well as all of these others, because it's not black and white. This kind of makes it sound like it's a little bit black and white, but you'll be able to see more clearly when you see the 5 precepts. Notice the Buddha doesn't give you an exhaustive list. He gives you 3 impactful ones, but then you're going to need to figure out the others, because he couldn't have given you an exhaustive list, right? Notice he doesn't say, it would be unwise to walk up to someone and punch them in the face. Well, if you understand right action, you already know that that's the case, because if you walked up and punched somebody in the face, they're probably going to punch you back. That's the cause and effect. That's the natural law of karma. Or they're going to pull out a knife or a gun, or their friends or their family are going to come attack you, right? That's the natural law of karma. But he didn't put that in here because you need to apply this in all situations. Notice he doesn't say it's unwise to drag your suitcase through the aisle of a plane and run over people's feet and bump into their knees. right? He didn't say that because planes didn't even exist 2,500 years ago. So it's impossible for him to come up with an exhaustive list, but he's giving you 3 impactful ones. And then you need to be able to figure out all those others, that you're not causing harm through your bodily actions. Then there's right livelihood. Here he says, in what, monks, is right livelihood? Here, monks, the noble disciple, having given up wrong livelihood, keeps himself by right livelihood. Here he's just saying something general and very broad here, but then he goes into detail in other parts of his teachings. First, what a livelihood is how you choose to sustain your life. If you choose to sustain your life off of causing harm to others, this harm is going to come back to you. So the Buddha teaches you what's called the first fold of purification and the second fold of purification. I'm going to teach you the first fold of purification for your livelihood today. So here he's giving you these 5 livelihoods that would cause harm. And if you did these livelihoods in order to sustain your life, you're causing harm to others, so harm's going to come back to you. So he talks about eliminating businesses and weapons, living beings, meat, substances that cause heedlessness, and poisons, because these are 5 livelihoods that cause harm to others. But remember, none of this is based in belief. You need to be able to independently verify what he's sharing. He's not giving you rules and commandments. He's showing you the cause and effect. So let me show you how to do that with one of these, and then you can do it with the others on your own if you like. So let's just say the substances that cause heedlessness. If I was standing on the street corner selling crystal methamphetamine and heroin and cocaine into the community, I'm causing harm to this community. They're getting addicted to this substance. Now they're going out and robbing and stealing, selling their bodies, things like this in order to bring me money, right? Well, now standing on the street corner and causing harm to this community, I'm very likely to experience all of these types of things. I can get beat up. I can get murdered. I can get robbed. I can get arrested. I can get addicted to these substances myself. This is the results of my decisions of choosing to sustain my life off of causing harm to others. And now this harm is coming back to me, right? So standing on the street corner selling substances into the community is causing harm. So in most places in the world, what I just described is illegal. And you'll get arrested for that, but not everywhere. There's some places in the world that they won't arrest you for that, but you'll still experience the natural law of karma. The natural law of karma is functioning at a much higher level than the human laws. The human laws are imperfect because they're created by human beings and they're administered by human beings. So for example, the place where I grew up, if I chose that I would like to be a cashier at a liquor store, I'm not going to get arrested for that, right? Nobody's going to come arrest me for that. But if you understand the natural law of karma, you realize that this is really unwise because this natural law is functioning at a much higher level than the human laws, because the liquor stores are places that get robbed. Again, people get beat up, people get murdered. You can experience dealing with clientele who are intoxicated, and now you have to deal with this from time to time as people are coming in to purchase alcohol. So even though the government isn't going to arrest you for this, if you understand the natural law of karma, which is functioning at a much higher level, you might choose to not take that job where you're a bartender or you're a person selling alcohol or something like that, because this is the natural law of karma. That's why individuals are experiencing certain challenges in those livelihoods. So you could do that with each one of these livelihoods, and you could see how it produces unwholesome results for you. Whether you choose to do these things or not, it's a choice for you to make. I'm not here to tell you whether you should or shouldn't do these things. I'm just here to help you see the natural law of karma, and then you make the choices for yourself. And what the Buddha is guiding you to is a peaceful and joyful mind and a peaceful and joyful life. But how could you ever get to a peaceful and joyful life if you're dealing with intoxicated people all the time at your livelihood? It wouldn't be very enjoyable to do that kind of thing. So that's why the Buddha is giving you this. But then he also teaches you, as part of the first fold of purification, how to actually perform your livelihood in a way that's producing success for you. He's helping you to be able to get to a point where you're doing really, really wonderful in your livelihood. So he teaches you to avoid and eliminate these types of things: flattering, scheming, hinting, belittling, and pursuing gain with gain. So I'll walk you guys through this so you can understand what these are. So if I was the mayor of a town, and I was elected into this position, I'm not causing any harm to anybody. I'm not having business in weapons, living beings, meat, substances that cause heedlessness, and poisons, right? But if I was scheming, if I was corrupt, if maybe 10, 15 years into my career, people find out that I've been doing backhanded deals, I'm going to have a very difficult time having a wonderful livelihood and sustaining my life in this career, because people aren't going to be willing to reelect me when they see what I've been doing. So that's why the Buddha teaches you not to have corruption or scheming as part of your livelihood. Then he teaches you to eliminate flattery. What flattery is where you give insincere comments just to get people to try to buy things from you, right? If you've ever been into this kind of store where maybe you walk in and they're like, oh my gosh, that color of shirt really brings out the colors of your eyes. Wow, the shape of your face is just so handsome, so beautiful. You know, I have these earrings over here that'll go really well with that shirt you're wearing. Would you like to come take a look at them? Right? You might be like, ugh, I don't really like this place. And you might have felt like you wanted to leave out of the business. Well, that's the cause and effect. That's the natural law of karma. So if you are just flattering people, giving insincere comments to try to get them to buy things, they're going to see through that, because people do business with people. They don't do business with businesses. They do business with people. And if as a person, you're interacting with them in this type of way, they're not going to want to do business with you, right? So you'd like to interact with them in a way that it doesn't involve flattery, where you're just giving them insincere comments to try to get them to buy things from you. Then there's hinting. Hinting is where you're clear and concise in your work projects, where you're communicating with people in clear and concise ways. So for example, if we were all together on a project team and we were going in to brief the boss on this project that we are working on, if we're just hinting around and we're not really being clear and concise in the way that we're talking, we're not going to do so well in this project and in this career. But if we go in and we're clear and concise and precise in the way that we're communicating to the boss, and the boss can clearly see exactly what we're doing on this project, we're going to be very successful in this career. That's what the Buddha is guiding you to be able to do, is be very successful in your career. Then belittling. He teaches to eliminate this. This is where you're being degrading and diminishing towards others in your career, like your customers, your coworkers, your business partners, or your competition. Sometimes people think that it's wise to degrade and diminish your competition and talk bad about others. This actually looks poor on you. It actually reflects poorly on you. So the Buddha teaches you to eliminate that. You don't need to talk poorly of your competition to be able to be successful as a business person. Instead, if somebody comes in and they ask you about your competition, you can just say things like, well, I'm not exactly sure what they do, but this is what I can do for you. And now focus on what you can do for this person. And now that way you can be successful. Then there's something called pursuing gain with gain. What this is where you take a job just for the paycheck, where you really don't care about the product or the service. You're just doing this for the money. And that's all you care about. If you've ever had that kind of job where you just were working for the money, you probably really enjoyed it at the beginning. You were probably so excited because you were getting this big fat paycheck. But then after a few months or however long, it just kind of faded away and you felt so bored and so mundane, and you like dragged yourself to work each day. And how can you get to peace and joy if you're dragging yourself to work each day? The Buddha is teaching you to have a livelihood that doesn't even feel like work anymore, that you feel so enthused and you have such ambition and motivation to do that work that it doesn't even feel like work anymore, right? Of course, you're collecting money, but that's not the real focus. The real focus is that you really have an interest in providing this certain product or this service to the public. And sure, you're going to collect your money because you need that, but you really just thoroughly enjoy this particular product or service, whatever it is that you're doing. There's actually people like that here in Thailand, that if you go outside, I imagine there's probably some person standing on the street corner selling mango and sticky rice. and they're probably woke up this morning. They probably went out into their mango grove. They probably picked their mangoes with a big smile on their face. They probably brushed off the dust and put them in their basket, and they brought them to the market. And now they're standing there with a big smile on their face, slicing their mangoes, and they're putting them over top of that warm, sticky rice, pouring the coconut milk over top of the mango, and then they hand it to you with a big old smile on their face. And they can't imagine doing anything else other than sharing that mango and sticky rice with you. And sure, they collect their 40 baht and they put it in their pocket, and they need that in order to sustain their life, but it's not even about the money. All they are interested in is providing you that mango and sticky rice. And they can't imagine doing anything else other than selling you that mango and sticky rice. That's what you need to do. You need to figure out, what's your mango and sticky rice? What is it that's you're going to be so enthused and enjoy so much doing that it doesn't even feel like work anymore? Okay. So this is right livelihood, that you're eliminating business and weapons, living beings, meat, substances that cause heedlessness and poisons. And then you'd like to eliminate scheming, flattering, hinting, belittling, and pursuing gain with gain. This is the first fold of purification. And this is what you'd like to work on initially. But if you're in between jobs, or if you're in a job now that you don't particularly care for, you might decide to look at the second fold of purification as well, because you would like to be able to work on this, but you'd also like to look at the second part. That's in our book series here in volume 12, chapter 14. If you look there, you're going to see the first and second fold of purification. And that would be really helpful for you if you're in between jobs and you're looking for a job, or if you're in a job that you don't really care for very well and you would like to move to something new. That would be a great chapter for you to be able to look at. Okay. So just to summarize that, we've got right speech, which is to ensure that you're not causing any harm through your verbal conduct, keeping in mind that we have communication of verbal, text, chat, post, emails. All of this should be harmless. Using right speech, eliminating lying, slander, harsh speech, and frivolous speech. But then more detail, the 5 factors of well-spoken speech, speaking at the proper time, what you say is true, gentle, beneficial, and with a mind of loving kindness. Then you'd like to be eliminating any kind of harmful bodily actions to practice right action or wise action, that you're not causing any harm through your bodily actions. Then you'd like to be able to practice right livelihood, where you're not causing any harm through the decisions that you're making to perform a certain livelihood, or the decisions that you're making as part of your livelihood, that you eliminate scheming, flattering, hinting, belittling, and pursuing gain with gain, and making sure that you're not having business in weapons, living beings, meat, substances that cause heedlessness, and poisons. Again, what you choose to do about your moral conduct is for you to decide. But what we're doing here is helping you see this natural law of karma. There's no moral police that's going to come and check in on you. I'm not going to be looking at your Facebook page to make sure that you're speaking with the 5 factors of well-spoken speech. But what you'll see is if you implement this stuff, life just gets better and better and better, and your relationships just improve more and more and more. So do you guys have questions on the moral conduct section?
Yeah. Business in meats, is that livestock?
I'm sorry?
Business in meat?
Uh-huh.
Do you mean livestock?
Yes,
As
and
in
also
animals and that?
selling meat too.
Okay.
Because this is where you can get disease and illness. This is how COVID came into the world, is people that were selling meat, right? The virus jumped from the animals into the humans, and then that's how we all got affected by that. There's millions of viruses that are waiting in the animal world for us, that if we continue to have business in meat and living beings, those viruses are going to make their way into the human world, and we'll continue to experience problems because of that.
So if there was safe ways to sell and produce meat, that would be okay?
It's not about what's okay or what's not okay. It's about seeing the cause and effect relationship here. So if you're having business in meat, that means that there's an animal that's been killed. And now that animal being killed, you can't practice harmlessness as long as you're killing animals, or you're in the process somewhere along the supply chain of this animal being killed. And then now this is where you're susceptible to virus and illness. Or if you're dealing with the live animal, that's why the Buddha talks about living beings, is that now you can be easily injured through that, because this horse, say you're a horse trainer, right? And now you're training this horse. You can easily get killed or injured or otherwise having difficulties from that livelihood. Whereas if you were, say, teaching children how to speak English, there's no inherent risk in that in terms of your own bodily injury or things of this nature. Mm-hmm.
So Buddha believes that everyone should be vegan or vegetarian.
The Buddha doesn't believe anything. An individual who's on this path, you don't believe anything, because with belief, you don't know what's true or false, and it's never black and white. Instead, you need to be able to see the truth and see the wisdom. So there's going to be some people who might choose to move to vegan lifestyle and eating plant-based food, but because human beings have been on meat for so long, as people slowly start to move away from that, there's going to be some people that biologically their body can't function through eating plants alone, even with supplements and things like this. So when we say everybody has to be vegan, that's permanence, right? And there's no such thing of that in the world in terms of these types of things that we're talking about. So these aren't rules or commandments. They're not beliefs of things that you believe, but it's instead seeing the cause and effect relationship that when you eat meat, it actually is causing harm to an animal. And then now it's going to cause harm to your body as well, where you'll experience more sickness and illness to your body and also in the mind as well. But somebody choosing to get onto a plant-based food supply, while that could be wise for many people, there might be some people that need to eat a little bit of animal products, and that is having loving kindness and compassion for yourself. So it's not about this black and white situation where everyone has to do it one way and nobody do it another way. It's a matter of being able to see the cause and effect and making decisions not based in craving, where your mind is just craving the central desire, the taste of the meat on the tongue, but instead you're making wise choices that are going to lead to wholesome results for yourself and the people around you and the beings around you as well. Done? I see you thinking. You're thinking. Are you going to be here tomorrow?
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about veganism tomorrow. Yeah. So we'll go and explore it a lot more. I'll give you a lot more details about that. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So let's move into the mental discipline section, because the wisdom section gives you the information to be able to understand that it's wise for you to improve your moral conduct. But you wouldn't be able to just go out there and start practicing this moral conduct, because you have certain pollutions of the mind that make it difficult for you to speak gentle in every single situation. Because it's one thing to sit here and talk about, let's talk gentle. Let's be kind and loving and warm and compassionate. It's one thing to sit here and talk about it, but it's a whole other thing to go out into the world and actually do it, especially in the situations where you have the deepest cravings, desires, and attachments in those relationships with parents, siblings, life partners, and children. So that's where the mental discipline section comes in. This is where the Buddha is now going to teach you how to train your mind to uproot these pollutions so that you can implement the moral conduct. Okay, so now we're going to go through the mental discipline section. So here's the words of the Buddha on right effort. He says, "In what, monks, is right effort? Here, monks, a monk rouses his will, makes an effort, stirs up energy, exerts his mind, and strives to prevent the arising of unarisen, evil, unwholesome mental states. He rouses his will, makes an effort, stirs up energy, exerts his mind, and strives to overcome evil, unwholesome mental states that have arisen. He rouses his will, makes an effort, stirs up energy, exerts his mind, and strives to produce unarisen, wholesome mental states. He rouses his will, makes an effort, stirs up energy, exerts his mind, and strives to maintain wholesome mental states that have arisen, not to let them fade away, to bring them to greater growth, to the full perfection of development." This is called right effort. So he's talking about 4 things here that you need to apply effort to actually be able to do. He's talking about preventing unwholesome mental states that have not arisen from arising. You're going to need to apply the effort to do this. There's certain unwholesome mental states that are not currently in your mind right now, and you're going to need to apply the effort to prevent those from ever coming into the mind. A good example of that is probably killing another human being. Probably the farthest thing from your mind right now. You probably have no interest in doing this whatsoever. And what the Buddha is saying is those types of things that aren't currently in your mind, that are unwholesome, apply the effort to prevent them from ever coming into your mind. Because once they come into your mind, now you might act upon it, and it's really unwise to do that. So you're going to need to apply the effort to prevent these kinds of things from coming into your mind. Then he teaches you to abandon unwholesome mental states that have arisen in the mind, because there's certain unwholesome mental states in your mind right now. As an unenlightened being, you're going to have that. So when you see those things, you're going to need to apply the effort to eliminate it out of the mind. So an example might be if you're in a current relationship and you're having craving for sex outside of your relationship, that's going to produce unwholesome results for you. You're going to need to apply the effort to abandon that or eliminate that out of the mind. Or say you have anger, frustration that comes up in your mind. That's an unwholesome mental state. You're going to need to apply the effort to abandon that and eliminate that out of the mind. Then the third one is produce unarisen, wholesome mental states to arise in the mind. There's certain wholesome mental states that you're going to need to cultivate in the mind that aren't currently in your mind right now. You're going to need to apply the effort to bring those wholesome mental states into your mind. So for example, like generosity. Generosity is giving and sharing with the people around you more than is strictly required without any expectation of anything in return, such as your time, effort, energy, and resources. So this is helping to train your mind to let go. Not only does meditation and other things like this train your mind to let go, but so does generosity. So when you're giving and sharing, it's going to train your mind to let go. Because in the unenlightened state with crave and desire attachment, there'll be a certain amount of selfishness where you're holding on to things very tightly. And you're going to need to train your mind to let go by practicing generosity. Well, if you find it hard to be generous with people and you see that there's some selfishness in your mind, you're going to need to apply the effort to bring in this generosity where you can give and share with the people around you. Or say compassion. Compassion is the concern for the misfortune of others. If you're on one side of this, you'll be indifferent to other people's misfortune. You'll see someone struggling with drug addiction or homelessness, and you'll be like, I don't care. It's not my mother. It's not my father. It's not my brother and my sister. I don't care, right? That's indifference. Or you'll be on the other side where you'll be worried and have anxiety. Say, oh my gosh, those kids don't have food. What are they going to eat? Oh my gosh. And you'll be so worried and having anxiety, right? So on either side of this, there's no peace and joy where you're indifferent or you're having worry and anxiety. So you're going to need to bring your mind to the middle, which is compassion, where you have concern for the misfortune of others. So where you see that your mind is indifferent or you see that it's having worry or anxiety in this regard, you're going to need to apply the effort to bring your mind to this wholesome mental quality of compassion. Then there's maintaining wholesome mental states that have arisen, not allowing them to fade away, and work to increase their growth in the mind, bring them to the full perfection and full development. So there's certain qualities that are in your mind right now that are wholesome, and you're going to need to support those, encourage those. Don't allow them to fade away. A good example is loving kindness. Loving kindness is something you probably have in your mind, which is having a genuine interest in seeing all beings be well. You probably have that to a certain degree, but it hasn't been brought to full growth, full perfection, and full development. Because in some situations, you can be loving and kind, but in other situations, you might be angry and bitter and hostile and harsh. That's the ill will. That's the opposite of loving kindness. So you're going to need to bring this loving kindness to full growth, full perfection, full development. That you have it in your mind as a wholesome quality, but you need to apply the effort to bubble it up in your mind to the point where you can be loving and kind with everybody. Or say sympathetic joy. You probably have sympathetic joy in your mind. What sympathetic joy is where you have joy for others' success, even if you didn't contribute to it. This is the opposite of jealousy or envy, right? So you probably have sympathetic joy in your mind. If somebody came to you and said, hey, I'm thinking about going to Thailand in about 6 months. And you'd be like, oh, I've been to Thailand. That's a wonderful place. You know, there's this lady that sells mango and sticky rice on the corner, Chiang Mai. You might decide to go there and check her out. She's got some really great mango and sticky rice, right? You're like really pleased for their success. You're not jealous. You're not envious, right? You probably already have that quality in your mind. But then you're in other situations. Maybe you're at work and there's a new position that opens up, and you apply for it, and so do some of your coworkers, but they get the job instead of you. You might be jealous. You might be envious of them, especially when they're gloating and walking around the office with their conceit all puffed up that they got this brand new job with a big salary, right? It might be hard for you. You might experience some jealousy or envy coming up in your mind. That's coming from your craving, your desire, your attachment. You're going to need to apply the effort to eliminate that out of the mind and bring in this wholesome quality of sympathetic joy. Oh, I'm so pleased for you, Barbara. That's going to be a great job. I know your family is going to really benefit from that a lot. Congratulations to you, right? Even inside, you're just a little bit, but you got to get that out, right? You got to bring that up in the mind so you can permeate that sympathetic joy in the mind. Okay, so this is right effort. I use some examples here just to illustrate for you what the Buddha is teaching you. What's wholesome and that's in your mind, and what's unwholesome that's in your mind, that's going to be unique to you. You're going to need to figure that out. And the next factor is what's going to help you to be able to do that, because you wouldn't be able to practice right effort without right mindfulness. So this is the next one. Okay, so I'll read this one to you and then I'll teach it to you. In what, monks, is right mindfulness? Here, monks, a monk resides, reflecting on body as body, dedicated, clearly aware and mindful, having put aside craving and worry for the world. He resides reflecting on feelings as feelings, dedicated, clearly aware and mindful, having put aside craving and worry for the world. He resides reflecting on mind as mind, dedicated, clearly aware and mindful, having put aside craving and worry for the world. He resides reflecting on mental objects as mental objects, dedicated, clearly aware and mindful, having put aside craving and worry for the world. This is called right mindfulness. So he's talking about 4 things here. Body as body, feelings as feelings, mind as mind, mental objects as mental objects. What he's describing is what's called the 4 foundations of mindfulness. I'm going to explain to you guys what this is, but let's just talk more generally about what mindfulness is before we go into the detail. In general, mindfulness means awareness of mind, where you're aware of your thoughts and your ideas and what's going on in your own mind. Oftentimes in the unenlightened state, we're not aware. We're just plowing through the world, knocking down trees and burning up the forest. I don't know about you guys, but that's what I did for a long time. I was knocking down the trees and burning up the forest. And I looked behind me and I was like, who knocked down all those trees? And who lit that fire? It kind of smells smoke. And then I learned right view. And I was like, oh my gosh, I knocked down all those trees. I'm the one who lit that fire. Oh my gosh, I need to fix this, right? So we walk around sometimes without mindfulness. We're just making all kinds of decisions, thinking everybody else is the problem, right? That ego in there is telling us that we're perfect and everybody else is the problem, right? But then you start learning and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm the one making all these unwise decisions. So that's what you need. You need this introspection, this reflection, this ability to look inward and see what's going on within your own mind. So oftentimes people just hang out with that for a few months, just working on developing that. You need to make sure you understand what mindfulness is, because this word has made its way into common discussions, but people aren't typically using it in the way that the Buddha used it. Someone might say, can you mindfully carry this glass of water to that table? What they're really saying is careful. Right? They just replaced the word careful with mindful. That's not what the Buddha is saying. He didn't say, can you mindfully carry this glass of water to the table? That's careful. That's all that is. So if other people would like to use it that way, it's up to them. But if you would like to understand what the Buddha taught, you're going to need to get more and more close to what it is that the Buddha was sharing. When he's talking about mindfulness, he's talking about awareness of mind, being introspective, looking inward, and being able to see your own thoughts, your ideas, your feelings, and all these kinds of things. This is what's going to help you to transform your mind. But more specifically, he's talking about the 4 foundations of mindfulness. What this is this is the life cycle that your discontentedness is going to take as it's arising in the mind. When you experience certain contact through your eyes, ears, nose, the tongue, the body, and the mind itself, your mind's going to see that contact as either agreeable or disagreeable. And then if it's agreeable, there's going to be a conditioned pleasant feeling that arises. If it's disagreeable to you, there's going to be a conditioned painful feeling that arises. But before that feeling becomes a feeling in the mind, there's going to be bodily sensations first. This is the early warning system alerting you that you're about to get angry. You're about to get frustrated. Your mind's about to experience some conditioned feeling. And what the Buddha teaches you to do is apply right effort to cut it off and let it go as a bodily sensation, because you can get ahead of the curve. If you allow the mind to experience the feeling, then now you've got the feeling in your mind, and it's a lot harder to get that out. So you're not suppressing your feelings here or repressing them. What you're doing is you're cutting it off and letting it go before it becomes a feeling, because the bodily sensations are first. It's going to be like tingling in the body, tightening in the chest, tightening in the throat, heat in the face, pressure in the skull. This is the early warning system alerting you, hey, you're about to experience some anger. You're about to experience some frustration. Even those pleasant feelings, they have bodily sensations too, but people usually indulge in them, right? It's like these little tingling across the shoulders, up the back of the neck, over the skull. Some people call this warm fuzzies, if you've ever heard of that, right? It's like, oh, that feels so good, right? So people tend to indulge in that. But what this is an early warning system alerting you that you're about to experience a conditioned feeling. It's like the mind saying, I'm about to experience a conditioned feeling. I'm about to experience a conditioned feeling. I'm about to experience a conditioned feeling. And what you would like to do is apply right effort and say, nope, I'm not going to let you do that. And you cut it off and let it go. It's kind of like if you were out on a boat and you were going from Indonesia to Australia and you're out in the middle of the sea. You'd like to prevent the water from ever coming into the boat, because once the water gets into the boat, you've got a real problem to deal with. You've got to get it out. So the same thing is true is once you allow these conditioned feelings into the mind, now you've got to get it out. And your mind's going to stay wired this way to keep forming these feelings. You've got to get ahead of the curve where you're cutting it off and letting it go before it becomes an actual conditioned feeling. Again, you're not suppressing your feelings or repressing them. You're cutting it off before it even becomes a feeling. Because if you don't cut it off as a bodily sensation, it's going to become a feeling. And now you're angry. Now you're frustrated. Now you're agitated. If you missed it as a bodily sensation, cut it off as a feeling, because you're not going to be able to catch it right now at this early stage of your development every single time as a bodily sensation. So it is going to become a feeling sometimes. So cut it off there and let it go there. Because if you don't cut it off there, it's going to start affecting the condition of your mind. Have you ever been angry or irritated for a few hours or a few days or like a week or two? Been like grumpy and kind of frustrated? Of course you have, right? Because you didn't understand this, right? That there was some contact that you experienced, the bodily sensation arose, you didn't cut it off there because you didn't even know that you should. There wasn't the wisdom there. It became a feeling. Now the mind's experiencing the feeling. And now for a few minutes, a few hours, a few days, a week or two, you're like grumpy and irritable. Right? That's the condition of the mind. You need to be aware of that condition of the mind, because if you're noticing this irritability and this frustration, you've got to cut that off with right effort and bring your mind back to the middle. And then there's something called a mental object. What a mental object is a deeply rooted container in the mind. In this case, it's ill will, what I'm talking about with anger and frustration. Those 10 fetters that I talked about yesterday, those 10 pollutions, those are all mental objects. They're deeply rooted containers in the mind that need to be uprooted out of the mind. So you're going to need to build awareness of what those are. So right now, you might not even know what they are. I introduced them yesterday as part of the class, and there's other programs that I share. Like in August, I have a retreat where I spend about an hour to an hour and a half on each one of these, where I teach you what it is, what the symptoms are, how to eliminate it and how to know that you've actually eliminated it. Because you're going to need awareness that there's conceit, for example, arising, the arrogance, the pride, the ego. You're going to need to be aware of your ill will. You're going to need to be aware of these other mental objects. So that's what the 4 foundations of mindfulness are, is that you're aware of the bodily sensations, the feelings, the condition of the mind, and the mental objects, and then you apply right effort to cut it off and let it go. That's the technical description of this. But let me explain to you how this looks in day-to-day life. Let's just say I'm watching the news. And as I'm watching the news, there's something that comes on, and you see it with your eyes and you hear it with your ears, and you find this to be disagreeable. And you're noticing the tingling and the bodily sensations, the tightening of the chest, the heat, the tightening in the throat, the heat in the face and pressure in the skull. You know you're about to get angry. You're about to get frustrated. Well, rather than just sit there and dwell in that, you would like to use your mindfulness to notice this is what's occurring, and now you apply right effort to cut it off and let it go. You might need to redirect the mind. That eventually you'll get to the point where you develop inside the mind this internal mechanism to be able to cut off and let go. But in the meantime, what you might need to do is redirect your mind. Turn off the news, go for a bike ride, go for a walk, go to the bathroom, wash your hands, go to the kitchen, get a glass of water, something like that. Don't allow your mind to just sit there and dwell in that. Cut it off. Move the mind in a different direction. This is what's going to help you to be able to transform your mind. Because if you just sit there and watch the news, the bodily sensations coming, and then, well, wham, your mind's experiencing the anger and frustration. It's going to stay wired this way. You'd like to break this up so that the mind's no longer doing that. Okay? So this is how you apply it in day-to-day life. You use your mindfulness to watch over the mind, and wherever you see wholesome and unwholesome qualities, you apply right effort to either abandon the unwholesome or arise the wholesome. One of the ways that I think about this mindfulness is it's kind of like a virus scanner on the computer, is that it kind of sits there in the background, right? The virus scanner is looking at your hard drive, and anytime there's a virus that hits your hard drive, it'll isolate it, it'll quarantine it, and then it'll clean it up off the hard drive and kick it off the hard drive, right? So it's the same kind of thing that you're doing, is your mindfulness is watching over your mind. And anytime you see an unwholesome quality, you need to be able to apply right effort to cut it off and clean it up and get it out of the mind, or support and encourage the wholesome qualities. So I'm going to go to the next one, and then I'm going to open up for questions. So this next one is called right concentration. Here, what the Buddha is teaching you is he's describing to you what's called the jhanas. I'm not going to read this to you, because what the Buddha is describing is he's actually describing the byproduct of having put together all of the Eightfold Path. If you dial in the Eightfold Path really well, you're going to start experiencing the jhanas. What these are, they're preliminary phases that your mind goes through on the way to the first stage of enlightenment. This is where you experience enhanced qualities of mind. So, for example, in the second jhana, you will experience what's called oneness of mind or unification of mind. Prior to the second jhana, there's a conscious mind and there's a subconscious mind. But by the time you get to the second jhana, you just have one mind. It's called unification of the mind, or there's this oneness of mind, because your conscious mind is polluted, but your subconscious mind is even more heavily polluted, and you're not aware of your subconscious mind. If you've ever been around some friends or something like this, and you just blurted something out, and you were like, where did that come from? That was really maybe racist or sexist. And you're like, I don't think that way. That's not the way I think. Like, why did I blurt that out? That was so silly of me. That's your subconscious mind throwing something into your conscious mind, and you just blurted it out, right? You didn't have insight into that subconscious mind, and it just threw something into your mind. So what you would like to be able to get to is where you have full awareness of the entire mind, because you can't purify your mind if you don't have awareness of the entire mind. So in the second jhana, there's this oneness of mind, or this unification of the mind. There's enhanced qualities that you experience through these different phases that the Buddha is describing. And the way to get to this is by practicing the entire Eightfold Path. And then your mind's going to eventually get to the first stage of enlightenment, where the mind's not enlightened yet at that point, but you're well on your way. We talked about this a bit yesterday. So here in the Eightfold Path, the Buddha is describing these jhanas. which I teach in other programs. But in this foundational program, I don't teach you what the jhanas are. I just give you this little introduction to it. In fact, this month, in about 2 weeks from now, I'm going to be teaching and experiencing the jhanas in the 4 stages of enlightenment course. That's where I'm going to be teaching this. Okay. But what I'm going to teach you here as part of the foundational course is how to practice right concentration, because the Buddha describes this in other parts of his teachings. There's 2 parts to practicing right concentration. There's developing a meditation practice and practicing singleness of mind in day-to-day life. You're going to need to have a meditation practice. This is going to help you to develop your concentration and your mindfulness. You wouldn't be able to practice right mindfulness without developing right mindfulness. So that meditation we did this morning, where you're focused on the breath, and anytime the mind moves off the breath, you cut that off and let it go and come back to the breath. That's called breathing mindfulness meditation. You're developing this awareness of the mind. Your goal here isn't to eliminate your thoughts. Your goal is to notice them sooner and sooner and cut them off and let them go easier and easier. We're going to be talking about this afternoon after lunch, where I'm going to dive into detail about breathing mindfulness meditation, teaching you all the ins and outs of your practice of how to develop that. You're going to eventually need to develop a practice of 2 or 3 meditation sessions for about 30 minutes. This can sound like a lot to some people, but there's probably unbeneficial things that are going on in your life right now that if you kind of scaled that stuff back, you'd actually have a lot more time in your life. Sometimes we spend a lot of time searching social media or watching YouTube videos and things like this. But if you ended up scaling some of that stuff back, you'll actually have a lot more time. So we're going to talk about developing a meditation practice this afternoon. But that's part of right concentration, is developing that meditation practice. Then the second part is to practice singleness of mind, where you're just doing one thing at a time. Oftentimes people think that they can do multiple things at a time. In fact, we call it multitasking. And you might even have work environments that are incentivizing you to do multitasking. But your mind actually can't do more than one thing at a time. It's physically impossible. This wasn't a big thing until the 1960s. In the 1960s, computers came out and they can multitask because they have a multiprocessor and they can do multiple processes. So people are like, human beings, we should multitask. It's not possible. What you're actually doing is you're doing one thing for like 3 to 5 seconds, and then you're rapidly cycling to another thing for 3 to 5 seconds or 8 seconds. And then you're rapidly cycling to another thing to a few seconds. You're not actually doing all 3 things. So if you're talking on your phone, watching TV, and you're eating a sandwich, you're not doing all 3 things. That's why when you got off the phone, you don't even remember what you talked about. This conversation that could have been maybe 10 or 15 minutes, and ended up being like 45 minutes or an hour. And then you probably said things that you regret and you got to go back and clean that up. Or you might have even promised to do certain things that you actually forgot and you didn't even actually do them. And now you got to call mom up and say, Mom, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to say those things to you. I was wrong for saying that. By the way, what did you say I was supposed to do for you? I forget. What was it? Right? You think that you're actually accomplishing more by talking on the phone, watching TV, and eating a sandwich. But in reality, you're actually spending more time, because not only is that event taking longer, but you've actually got to go clean it up later. So this is part of the lack of wisdom that the mind has, that it thinks it can do more than one thing at a time. You need to just do one thing at a time. And this is what hones your mind to do things really with focus and concentration and clarity. If you get home at the end of your day from doing work and you feel like it's hard to relax, you feel stress and anxiety, this is because you might be trying to multitask. It's almost like a racehorse racing around the racetrack. And if you've ever been to a racetrack where horses are running around the racetrack, if you go to the barn, they're not calm. They're all hyped up because they're so used to running around the racetrack. So if that's what you do, where all day long you're jumping from thing to 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 thing, when you go home, it's going to be very hard to relax. You're going to have a lot of stress and anxiety in your mind. So you like to practice just one thing at a time. There are some people in the world that don't know this, and because of the natural law of karma, these people are actually dead right now, right? There's people who are walking down the street, talking on the phone. You can't walk down the street and talk on the phone at the same time and be aware of everything that's going on. They walked out in the middle of the street, whack, they're dead, right? This is the natural law of karma. It's not about blame or fault. There's no being who's overseeing this. It's not about punishments and rewards. It's just the results of our decisions, that because this person wasn't doing just one thing at a time, they were talking on the phone and walking down the street, they walked out in front of that truck and whack, they're actually dead. So the Buddha teaches you to just do one thing at a time. And as you do this, your mind will become more and more refined, and you'll have focus and concentration and clarity. One of the ways that I think about it is that if you had a piece of wood and you had a steel rod and you were grinding that steel rod back and forth on the wood, it's going to bounce around a lot when you first get started, right? Because you don't have a groove going yet. But if you grind that steel rod back and forth enough, eventually you're going to get a nice groove going, right? And then when it pops out, you're going to know that and you're going to bring it right back. But if you grind that steel rod back and forth enough, eventually you're going to get a really deep groove going, and then it's never going to pop out. You're just always going to be in that groove. You're going to always be focused. So what you would like to do is, like, say you're washing dishes and your mind is wandering and you're thinking about something else. You'd like to cut that off and let it go and focus on washing dishes. Because if you allow your mind to wander, it's going to bounce around a lot. And now you can get cut. And next thing you know, you're in the hospital getting stitches on your hand. Or say you're in a business meeting and you're sitting there and you're thinking about your trip to Thailand in 6 months. And your boss is just like, walk, 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 walk. And just like, man, I can't wait to get out of here. Man, I want to go to Thailand, right? Well, that's not going to help you, right? You need to focus on what's going on in the business meeting. So you bring your mind back. Or say you're sitting in class and you're hearing a teacher teach the teachings of the Buddha and you're thinking, man, what about lunch? Man, I'm hungry. Man, it's like 12:15. Like he said he was going to go to lunch at 12 o'clock. And, you know, like I want to get my pad thai and my mango and sticky rice. He was talking about mango and sticky rice. Where you see your mind doing that, you'd like to cut that off and come back to whatever it is that you're focused on. And now if you do that enough, you're going to get that real deep groove going and your mind won't pop out. Okay. So this is right concentration. So just to summarize this, right effort is taking the initiative to eliminate unwholesome aspects of the mind and cultivate wholesome qualities in the mind. You're going to need to apply the effort to do that. The way that I taught my young son how to do this is I taught him to kick out the unwholesome and bring in the wholesome, right? You'd like to apply the effort to do that. Then there's right mindfulness, which is going to allow you to practice right effort, because you need awareness of the mind with the 4 foundations of mindfulness. You need to be aware of what's going on in the mind, and you need to ultimately practice the 4 foundations of mindfulness, but it's going to take you time to develop that, where you're aware of the bodily sensations, that early warning system that's alerting you that you're about to experience a conditioned feeling. Then there's the feelings themselves. Then there's the condition of the mind. Then there's the mental objects. You're going to need to be aware of all of that stuff. Then there's right concentration, where you practice meditation and you develop singleness of mind, and to the point where the mind's experiencing the jhanas, those preliminary phases that the mind's experiencing enhanced qualities of mind. So when you put together enough of the Eightfold Path, you'll start experiencing those qualities of the mind. So this is the mental discipline section. Any questions here? Anything you guys would like to talk about? Yes, sir.
Like the overall Eightfold Path. So then how do we apply each one? Is it in chronological order, or is it just what feels right or what interests you? Or?
You're dialing all this in at the same time. So it's not like you're mastering one before you do the other. It's kind of like you've got this speaker system and you're trying to get a really good quality sound out of the speakers, and you're tweaking these individual dials. So some people take like the squeaky wheel approach. Do you know about this? The squeaky wheel approach? Okay, so say you have a shopping cart and you've got 4 wheels and one of them is squeaking. Well, you're going to put oil on the squeaking wheel so that you can get the cart moving, because it's being hindered by that one squeaky wheel. Well, if you've got something that you're really struggling with, like say right speech, a lot of times people have difficulties with this. You might decide to focus on that because that's the biggest impact. That's the thing that's holding you back the most. And now you'd like to put oil on that and get it going really well. So oftentimes, for what the Buddha used to do is he used to teach people to practice right view first, is make sure they understood right view. And he would teach them that. That was the very first teaching for all of his new students. Then he would teach them the moral conduct. That was the second thing he would teach them, because you need to dial that in. Because if you think about your moral conduct, it's kind of like you're spewing oil all over the world, and you're not going to, it's like this broken pipe. You're not going to go clean up the oil on the floor first. You're going to shut down the pipe so it's not spewing oil over the world. So in terms of you getting to enlightenment, you'd like to shut down your unwise moral conduct. So you would teach that even before meditation. A lot of times people focus a lot on meditation, but he would focus on moral conduct as the second thing. Then he would focus on meditation. So you would like to be dialing all of these in at the same time, but you might take the squeaky wheel approach. Mm-hmm.
But so would you meditate at the same time?
Yeah. So like here in this course, you're meditating in the morning and in the afternoon. So you're getting your meditation practice going, but at the same time, you can be working on your moral conduct too. Like same time, meaning within the same month or same week, right? So you're all of this is working together and coalescing, because it's actually very challenging to actually implement the moral conduct without the mental discipline. Mm-hmm. Yes.
So you're saying your feelings start with bodily sensations before the feeling, and if you can get to the bodily sensations first, cut it off. I'm just wondering, when you started on this, how long did it take you to get to being aware at the bodily sensation level?
I wouldn't be a good threshold for you to think like that. And not only me, but nobody, because everybody's a little bit different. But it'll take you multiple years just to get to the point where every single time you're about to have a conditioned feeling, you notice it as a bodily sensation. Once you get to that point, though, where you can notice every single time as a bodily sensation, you're about 1 to 3 years away from enlightenment. So it'll take you a few years to get to the point where you can notice it every single time. But then from that point, what the Buddha shares is you're close by enlightenment. Enlightenment is close by. And I say it's about 1 to 3 years from that point, because that's what I notice, right? So everybody's going to be a little bit different. But do you notice the bodily sensations at all in any situation? Never, not even one situation. Okay, so that's where the meditation comes in, and practicing mindfulness in day-to-day life. I noticed a situation where I was having the bodily sensations very early in life. I would have never even told you that I was on the path to enlightenment, that I noticed this, there was a certain situation that I had where there was this intense rage that came up in my mind, and I noticed the bodily sensation, and I was like, whoa, what was that? So different people function differently, but just keep practicing your breathing mindfulness meditation. And then during your day, pay attention to your mind and the body, because before you experience any feeling, there is bodily sensations, but your mind just isn't aware of it right now. Mm-hmm. Okay. So you have another question?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I know I've asked a lot.
You don't have to apologize.
Yeah.
You're not doing anything wrong.
Cheers.
Not causing harm. Mm-hmm.
Just with awareness of bodily sensations and feelings, what's the difference between
the bodily sensations and feelings?
Because they seem like the same thing.
The bodily sensations, for example, with anger, would be like tingling in the body, usually rising up towards the head, tightening in the chest, tightening in the throat, heat in the face, pressure in the skull. That's the bodily sensation. But then there's going to be a moment where, boom, the feeling comes into the mind, and now the mind's angry. It's like an acute situation where, boom, the mind's now angry. That's the feeling. But then if it lasts for longer than a second, which it will if you're not cutting it off, now that's affecting the condition of your mind. That's where you're grumpy and irritable for a few minutes, a few hours, a few days, a week or two. That's the condition of the mind. Good? Okay. All right. So now it's time to go to lunch. It's about 12:22. I'm wondering, I normally give you guys an hour and a half for lunch, but would it be possible to shorten up the lunch a little bit? Anybody attached to an hour and a half lunch? Anybody craving it? Anybody going to be angry if they don't get an hour and a half? See? You just independently verified the third noble truth, right? That when you don't have craving, desire, attachment, there's no discontentedness. Okay, so normally we would get back at 1:30, but if we could get back at 1:45, that'll give you guys more than an hour and 15 minutes for lunch, but it'll give us the time that we need, because this afternoon, what I'm going to teach you is breathing mindfulness meditation. I'm going to teach you all the ins and outs of this and really connect it together for you to see how it connects into the Eightfold Path and help you to build up your practice with breathing mindfulness meditation. So if you guys would like to come back at 1:45, I'll pick it up there. Okay, so enjoy your lunch, and I'll see you guys perhaps afterwards. Okay.